Heyo, what's up, ZBrush friends? Sure, I'm talking to myself at this point. I don't think anybody's in, but let me just check to make sure the stream is good.
I have a lot of practice with her. Do you play ranked much? Not really.
If anybody's here, just give me a shout in the chat. Let me know you can hear me. Sure, I'm talking to myself at this point. I don't think any... I'm also going to throw you guys a quick message. Let me know if you guys got that one. Left side only? Oh, gosh. Well, that doesn't make any sense. I hope you're kidding when you said left side only. I'm not recording through Camtasia. Dang it. Ugh. Let me see. Why would it do this? Maybe I need to check. Let me just check the controller real quick. I'll be right back. Let's see. I might have to actually switch from. I was really excited to use this. Yeah, Mario Gaff is back. Sorry, guys. I just need to check to make sure. I wanted to use this podcast mic, but it looks like that's going to be a problem for me. Let me try and switch this to. It sounds great, just left side. Well, there's nothing we can really do about that in post, I guess. I don't want to put this up. I just can't imagine the YouTube comments are going to be so much fun if we leave just one side of audio. Which one was this? Okay, hold on. Okay, you guys can hear me now in the one channel? All right, question. Should it be mono or stereo, the setting? Sorry, guys, I am not an audio engineer, but been using this mic all day. Should be mono. Yeah, Scorpion Core wants to get this party started. I'm in. I want to as well. I just, okay, how about this? Okay, all right, well, yeah, let's get this party started. I'm just going to go left side. Hopefully you guys don't hate me. I apologize in advance. We'll have to do something for the post process. All right, well, thanks everybody for tuning in. Hopefully at least the left side of the audio sounds good. This podcast mic is a little bit better than the headset that I normally use. So today what I want to do for my stream, I know it's been a little while, hopefully everybody's safe and well. I'm working out of my little office at home, which has been quite nice. The only problem I have while working from home right now is that my chair is literally a kitchen table chair, so I'm using pillows as support system. So I need to order like a back thing on Amazon. But anyways, otherwise I'm doing great. And I want to come back to an oldie, kind of an oldie project that I never really got finished. Starting off when I was just getting into the streaming stuff about a year ago, I wanted to do this thing called ZBrush Mashup. So I got what was sort of like community driven. If any of you guys were still tuning in, I was trying to get ideas for future streams to do mashups of 2 topics. So the first one I landed on was Super Mario World and Bladerunner World. So if you go to ZBrushLIVE.com, let me just pull this up. Go into presenters, you'll find my page. I always want to make sure I highlight this stuff. I did a couple of these streams before, doing the character, doing the Bladerunner pistol, and even getting into some of the additional accessories like his backpack. So I was kind of thinking, like, for this mashup series, I want to do a complete scene here. So my goal is to try and actually do maybe Luigi as Gaff from Bladerunner, and Super Mario as Harrison Ford's character. So I want to do maybe like some sort of a, I don't know, like a showdown scene where like they're in the streets, maybe have sort of a setting, have a background, actually do the whole environment in a sort of stylized world between these 2 themes. So I got a few things done here. Like I got the Blade Runner pistol, that's pretty much good to go. I did the goal was to actually combine a few themes. Like Luigi, I was getting really deep with this theme here. But Luigi has the game Luigi's Mansion, right? I'm sure some of you guys, at least you know of it, maybe you haven't played it, but he has this backpack that has like a little, I don't even know if it's a vacuum or a light or both. But I wanted to sort of combine that, where instead of Luigi hunting ghosts, he's hunting replicants. So, yeah. So, and then there's the whole theory that Harrison Ford's character is actually a replicant, which, you know, you can say what you want. In 2049, they did mention or talk about the chance of him actually being one. So it's all in the realm of possibility. So I feel like this theme kind of works. It's all possible. And we're just throwing in some Super Mario World stuff in between. So today, what I want to do is one of the projects that I hadn't actually finished was actually getting the vehicle done. So Blade Runner is a pretty awesome, the Blade Runner sort of cop car look. He's not necessarily a cop. He's more of like a bounty hunter almost in a way. So you've got this sort of like style of vehicle that's pretty common and centralized throughout the series. It's a little bit more modified in 2049, which I really like, but I want to figure out a way to mash that up with Super Mario Kart Luigi's car. So I want to do sort of like a hybrid between those 2, because I really want to be able to have in that scene, I want this to be able to be here in the background, sort of have like a setting where like they're in the street, maybe in the rain, have like Mario's like dead, Gaff's like shot him since, or whatever, or he just sucked him up into the vacuum backpack. Either way, we'll make it PG-13. But so today I want to talk about just doing the vehicle, and I did start a little while back in one of those streams. So we'll talk about doing just like, I want to get to like the tires, getting some iconic elements that are sort of mixed between, so they're recognizable. The tires are pretty recognizable to me. I always remember those when I play Mario Kart, and I choose the type of tires that I want to run. And then let's see. So I wanted to load. Let's see. I did start a version of this. It was a pretty bad start. Actually, trying to just go in and make like a Blade Runner car. So I started just kind of like blocking out some elements here. And I'm going to take this. This is from one of the previous streams. I'm going to take this and actually try and repurpose this and make this more in line with the stylized car and the vehicle there. So eventually, I did do a little pose with Gaff Luigi, who is, he's in good form right now. He's got his Gaff pose, and I did some just quick renders here in Keyshot to kind of visualize this stuff. But what I'd like to do is actually do maybe a real-time render for the entire project. So I want to take this into maybe Unreal towards the end and actually simulate a whole scene here. So everything right now is just conceptual. So to get started with the vehicle, I kind of left off with this chunk here. And I got some like too techie stuff. I need to sort of simplify a lot of these shapes. So what I'm going to do is, let me just go in and load my spotlight. And let me know if you have any questions. I'm going to try my best to illustrate all these points, but feel free to throw anything out there, and you guys are tuning in. So if you have questions about some of these parts, a lot of these parts, I'm just doing a lot of just straight ZModeler. ZModeler's one of my favorites, but today I'm going to get into maybe probably working more organically. If you watch any of my streams, I do a lot of hard surface, or rather just box modeling, because I like the cleanliness of it. But today I'm going to have to break away from that just because the shape of the vehicle is going to take a little bit more to get done. So what I don't like is I'm going to go in, let's see, these things I don't need. I'm just going to try and consolidate here what I have, what I don't want. So let's go in. I think I'm just going to get rid of all these excess parts. Let's simplify first. These techie wheels are pretty cool, but I think those are going to be a little too techie for this sort of vein or this style. Get rid of those. All right. Now, the car itself, like what I probably want to do is, I'm thinking because I want it to sort of be in the stylized world, I want to keep some of the proportions from that, which means the cart itself is going to be more accurate to, I think, the scale in which I want to sort of reference. So I want him to kind of be almost as big as the thing. So when he fits in, I don't want as much space. Whereas, like, if you're looking at the Bladerunner car, he's got like a full car. It's, you know, there's a lot of extra space and gadgets and stuff inside. So I want to do a smaller sort of stylized scale, but then add some of the techie stuff, the details that'll work. So then I think for me, this is like, hey, Takavach, what's up? Yeah, this is actually, Takavach has been checking out the streams. I think you said that you were a big fan of this one, and you and a few others have been asking for me to bring this one back. So I want to get this thing completed. I want to get this whole project completed. So this is the one that I'm going to finish. One of the things that I hate about my creative process is a lot of times I'll start stuff, I'll never go back and finish it. I'll get it to like here, I'm like, oh, it was fun, and I move on. It's tough when you don't get paid to do it, right? If you get paid to do it, then you do it to completion, and done, you can call it done, even if you wanted to do more. But when you're doing this stuff for fun, it's like there's just so many things that we could do. But anyways, I want to go into, thanks for tuning in, Takavach. I hope you're doing well. I want to grab a reference image here. So I'm going to, in the maps, I'm going to go to draw palette up and down. I want to do just a blueprint, which I found online. There was I mean, it's a simple, it looks like somebody actually modeled this in 3D. So it's a sort of a 3D blueprint of, I think this is actually Mario's Kart. So it's close to Luigi's. Luigi's is a little bit longer. Mario's a little bit short and stocky. He is tall and skinny. So it's just a little bit more elongated, but I can use this to work with. So I'm going to keep everything in line with my Z axis being my symmetry line, so facing forward. So I want to go into draw palette here. And let's go in here and do, I want to angle this 90 degrees. And one of the things you could do with this is if you click adjust, you can go into an image like it's got both views. I just want to adjust this to be top view only. I really only need top view. And then that'll auto scale and adjust here. What's up, Chris? Today I'm going back to my old ZBrush Mashup project with Luigi, Super Mario World, and Bladerunner. So today what I want to do is I'm actually going to start working towards getting to something like this. I did a little test run. I want to start to get Luigi's Kart hybrid between this and the Bladerunner car. So I got to get some more details going in here. And this, I don't know if I like this old 80s version. I mean, the original is always better. But in this case, it's bubbly, so it does kind of fall in line with our stuff. But there's some stuff in the 2049 car that I really dig. And I think we can make something a little bit more, I guess, in line with the modern sort of style. So this is what I'm working on today. Yeah, so the stereo mic is only pumping to the left side for some reason. I have no idea why. I tried to go in and fix it, but I don't know what I'm doing. Let me see if I can go to like advanced audio properties real quick. Desktop audio, mic and aux. Let's see if I do this as mono. Does that give 2 channels? Anybody let me know. I just turned on mono. Oh, and it sounds quiet too, huh? Okay, that works. Okay, great. So we're back on double. All right, guys, look, we're doing stuff. We're making stuff happen. This is a good time for technology. Okay, so I'm sorry. I apologize. This is let me see if I can keep this. If I keep this closer, can you hear me better? If as long as I'm close up to this thing, am I loud enough? You're saying sound is low. How can I boost it? Let's see if I go to. I'm gonna boost it maybe 0.8 decibels. How about the? I just boosted the decibels here. Does it sound a little bit better? A little bit louder? Okay. Pixologic team saying to crank the gain. Let me just go do that real quick. Oh, Sideshow says it's good. Yeah, it's a bit better. 3 to 6 decibels. Okay, let me try that instead of boosting the gain. For some reason, I think the gain always sounds bad, but she's saying 3 full decibels. I'm at 0.8, so I'll go 3. Click close. Okay, we're at 3. This is great, guys. I appreciate everyone's involvement in this. I appreciate your patience, too. Three decibels currently. Tell me if that's loud enough. Okay, well, I'm just going to leave it there. Screen just flickered. Oh, I didn't do that. Well, I'm going to do, I'm just going to play it safe here and go up to, oh, he says good at 3. Okay, great. We're leaving it. If you guys have a real problem with it, we'll come back. So I want to get to something more like this, but then I want to actually get into some of the more advanced sort of shapes that they have here. So those, what I mean by those are, let me just grab you a quick pic here. The vehicle, so like, check this out. So here's a great concept. I forget the artist, looks like I might have, or the images were flipped. But this is George Hull. It's a really great concept piece I found online. It looks like it was for $20.49. So I like some of the techie stuff, like the extra little extrusions back here. It'd be sweet to kind of throw in, like, this actually has a turret gun. But just kind of like trying to keep in line between this and this. So that's kind of where I'm thinking. So kind of keeping the bubbly shapes. So back to your question, Chris, that's what I'm working on right now. So this is what I left off with in my previous stream, whenever that was, maybe almost a year ago, knowing how fast time goes. So this piece I started with ZModeler, and I'm actually going to go in and just start Dynameshing and concepting this stuff out, honestly, because Dynamesh is the best way to get organic shapes working quicker with brushes. So I'm going to go Dynamesh this piece, and I'm actually going to, let's see, I'm going to just Dynamesh this down to like 64. And let's smooth it out a little bit. I'm using Spotlight, so I need to turn off the brush samples, Spotlight projection anytime you bring images in here. And then I can remesh down. Now, anytime I want to smooth, I've recommended this before, the deformation palette has different smooths. You got a polish. What that does is that'll essentially go through and just polish out the surfaces. But when you get between basically large transitions at corners or edges, you start to get a little inflated edge. So that's the way that works, and that is good for some things. But when I want to do just an overall smooth, instead of holding shift and going across unevenly, what I can do is turn on Gizmo, go to the Gizmo settings, and click Smooth All. Smooth All, I actually have a little scale toggle that I can go in and just do this by hand. Tony Leonard, what's up? Yeah, that George Hull ref is wicked, isn't it? It's great. Actually, Tony, you were one of the people that maybe want to go back and finish this project too. You were asking me about this gun at the summit, which I felt so insecure about, knowing that, like, I never finished this project. I want this thing to be done. I have a vision in my head of how this scene is going to be completed. I need to do it. So I'm going to use this stream to finish up all these parts. So we got to get the vehicle done. All the character's pretty much good to go. I'm not necessarily happy with that jacket. Yeah, sculptor at moderate level. I love your name. If you get time, can you show how to project details from a picture onto a mesh? Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we could do that real quick. If you, it's with Spotlight. I'm loading these images into Spotlight by going to Texture. You go to Import, and let's just, I don't know, I'll bring in this blueprint image here. So once it's here in the texture palette, you click it, and then you click this Add to Spotlight button. So we've added this. This button here is to literally go in and dump this into the Spotlight menu. So you can bring in multiple images, which is what I've done. And then essentially the Spotlight controls are you press Z to turn the wheel on and off. When the wheel's off, you can rotate navigation. When the wheel's on, you can move the image. So if I want to project this, say, blueprint down on top of the model here, if I go in and I position the pivot wherever I want, or I can position the pivot, say, here in the center of the circle, you get rotation controls, which the pivot is your point of orientation. So I can hold Shift, I can scale this thing up. Let's say we just put that over the image. Now, the only way to project is when you press the Z key, you have to turn the wheel off. So you're basically setting up the model and then setting up the image over the model. Now, what's up, Greg? If the spotlight projection, so I've been turning this button off. Essentially, if you go to Brush, Sample, Spotlight, Projection, normally this button's on by default. When that button is on, if I say go in with a clay build-up brush and I try and sculpt on the model, when I press Z, the wheel is off, but I can't sculpt on the model. So I always turn that option off, which basically allows this to be a reference tool inside of ZBrush. But when that button is on, if you put the model over, or the image over the model, we can go in here. There's a couple ways to do it. You can decrease the opacity so you can see through the position, so you can kind of align it a little bit better. And then once you press Z to turn the wheel off, all you need to do is select a paintbrush. So I recommend clicking B, clicking P, and then grab that paintbrush. And then if you just simply go in and start painting through, you're going to be projecting this down onto that model. So if you press Shift Z, that turns off the whole spotlight projection. And you'll see I get that there. And of course, because it's poly paint, it's vertex dependent, so you're going to need more vertex points or higher resolution to get a better quality projection. But that's essentially how it works. Now, there's a couple other ways. There's one other way to do it. If I go to Color, Fill Object, I'll fill it with white. If you just simply go in and wherever you position your little spotlight wheel, so this pivot point does a couple things. Oh, you're saying mesh project. Oh, my bad. You're saying how to project details from a picture onto a mesh. So like if you wanted to do actual physical sculptural bump from pictures. Right, like how displacement does. Okay, so the only way that you do that, that really is solely dependent on the brush itself if you're going to use Spotlight. So if you use Spotlight, this works if the image is black and white. Like something like this might work. Let me just try. If I'm going to subdivide it a couple times, if you just go ahead and grab Standard Brush has RGB and Z add-on. And if you go in and you project, it's actually going to project the contrast values between that image. So it's projecting like so. Now that's not necessarily the most efficient way to do projections, right? Because it's dependent on the brush and how it builds up. So if you use brushes like this, it'd be better to maybe use a layer brush. So if you press layer, so hit B, click L, you get the layer brush. And here you basically are setting an intensity factor of how far that thing extrudes. So if I go push through like so, this will be solely dependent on the image. So you'll see that you get a little bit of artifacting because the image isn't like pure black and white. So you'd have to go through and modify and make this thing pure black and white, and you could project and paint through like this. Then, because if you go in, let's turn the opacity up, you'll see that this image has got some chalk-like background and sort of trying to make it look like a blueprint. So you can modify this stuff and make it pretty easy. Now, another way that you could do this, though, is if it was, let's just say, for the sake of argument, let me just undo this. I'm going to go to texture here. I'm going to click open. Let's just grab like a black and white image, say this one. And in the texture palette, if I have this here, I can click this, add this to Spotlight. Now, Spotlight, by default, it will clip, a lot of times it will clip out the black values. So if you go here to contrast, you click on contrast. If I click and drag this in counterclockwise, and then if I go, say, move this object now. So I'll turn contrast off. Let's position this over. Now, here's one of the things I would probably recommend as a better approach to get like bump and projection out is if you go into brush, paintbrush, I'm going to turn opacity down. And then if I go through and I project through, Eclipse, you're saying to trace the image. Are you talking about this part right here? So I'm basically just projecting black and white values onto that model. Now, one of the things that we can do out of this is we can grab, like if you get a projection like this, now the spotlight projection, you have this problem here, where it's going to basically go in, and when you get curved surfaces, it's trying to project an image and wrap around that surface. It can't quite get it. So what I'm going to do is just kind of go in here and deselect that stuff, or select it with masking, and project through. If you're talking about this eclipse, I'll go through this again real quick in a second. So one trick that you can do is if you're using Spotlight, black and white images, you can project down onto the model, and you can go into masking now, and or rather, because we're assigning polypaint, we can go to polypaint. We could do adjust colors. So adjust colors allows me to actually go and click and drag to those black values, and essentially I can go in and increase or decrease that tolerance to clip out or select those selections, or that color selection. So if I go click and drag the white, for example, I can basically now isolate all. Let's go turn off the polypaint here, so you get a mask. So now you could isolate a textured image that you project on with polypaint, and you can grab it with a mask. And you could even go into deformation now and tell this to go in and do like an inflate of like 5 or 10 and project that through. And if you're using Dynamesh, you could Dynamesh remesh that. So if considering it like a displacement map, what a displacement map is just taking those values and just extruding or pushing those values out based on contrast. So if you're painting with a black and white image, you could use this process to do it manually. So you could go in and like manually paint in, you know, a whole thing on the model, and then you could use the polypaint adjust colors to select those color channels. So all adjust colors is doing is, if we go back, turn on colorize, is just again allowing you, let's reset, to click and drag and color select areas. So if you want to grab the blacks or you want to grab the whites, and then you can then go inverse and you get a mask. So hopefully that's helpful and kind of goes in line to your question, Sculptor, because that's that it can be helpful to be able to go through and grab those things from an image. Now, to paint an image to completion on the whole model here, something like this that's like a tiled pattern that needs to be connected could be a problem. But I'll show you, since Eclipse, you were asking about just the projection process one more time. If I go back here, let's just use this image. We'll use this image as an example. So you could place the image over the model here, but instead of what I was doing before was basically you go to texture, click the image, click add to spotlight, it brings it here. Press the Z key to put the wheel on, which allows you to click and drag and position. Now once it's ready and in place, if you press Z to turn the wheel off, with a paintbrush on, you can go through and you can project through. But one other thing you can do is when you press the Z key, if you click and drag this little orange dot and you position it, say, in the middle of the image, this is a lot like the clone stamp tool in Photoshop, or it's relatable to that, whereas you can select from a particular area of the image. So the pivot point here, when this is positioned here, if we go up here and we click pin to spotlight, it's now pinning it to this selected area. Now to the right, there's a spotlight radius. If you click and drag this is choosing, you'll see the radius of the draw stroke. Just to the right, it's kind of hard to tell, will increase or decrease. So if I go about here, and when I press Z, now the image is going to disappear and you're going to see the whole draw stroke. So if I press Z, go back, let's decrease that a lot smaller, and it'll give me a smaller selection. And if I decrease my draw size, that's also going to shrink down the space of how much is being projected. So now I can go in and I can start painting, and it's sourcing from the image itself. So I could start painting here to kind of go complete these things out. And let's just say I go all the way to the top. This technique would help offset the projection errors at the curves. So if you kind of go in and you start painting here, what would happen before is it starts to wrap in an area right here that doesn't work. But if I rotate now my model, now I can keep sourcing from the same position on the image, and I can start to do a little bit of a better job. So if you don't pick your cursor up, it's essentially going to the borders of the image. You see the borders are right here in the ghosting effect. So if you let go, it resets back to the center of the image. Yeah, so Eclipse, you get the wheel by, so here, if you go to texture, if I select this here and you click add to spotlight, immediately the wheel pops up. The wheel will turn on and off with the Z key. So you toggle with Z on and off. So then once the wheel's on, you can click and drag on an image, bring it into place, and then wherever the image pivot point is, you can scale this up with the scale tool here. It's basically just clockwise and counterclockwise. So that's how you do that. Okay, cool. Sculptor, you said that that helps. Great. Yeah, so this is, I would say, if you're looking to get that displacement effect, just focus on bringing in black and white images into Spotlight. So you could do stuff like this, and you can go through and paint. And then what I could actually do now, you'll see that the scale factor of the model is going to change. So if I go really, really close up, now I get smaller repeats of these things. So that really has nothing to do with the model. That has everything to do with the scale of the image. So if I say leave the model here, if I scale that thing down, leave it up there, you'll see that I'm now getting smaller ones that I can then go in and start sort of projecting. But you'll see what it does is if I keep drawing my cursor to the left, you see it actually continues through and it goes to all the images. So if you position this about here, basically I can go and do a full square projection of that image and then go do a full square projection next to it and, you know, sort of do it this way. This isn't really the best way to get a tileable thing, but if it's something that's, you know, more, that's less tiled, that doesn't require bridging between edges, you could do some pretty awesome stuff with this for sure. So with that said, I'm going to go back to load my Spotlight configuration. Ibrahim, you were saying you can tile too in Spotlight. Yeah, you can. So if you just grab an image, let's say I just grab Luigi here, bring him up, you get tiling options here. So you have vertical and horizontal. So if I go horizontal, you see that skews it. That's 4 repeats, but if I repeat it 4 times vertically, then I get the native aspect ratio of the original image, and you get a tile. So if you were to do, so one thing to note, because you'll see when I press Z, a lot of times I want to press Z to turn the wheel off, because I'm using this for reference here, and I want to keep the images on canvas. So the Spotlight radius here, if that's not set to 12 o'clock at the top, then what happens is when I press Z, it will disappear. So if I have it like all the way down, you see you get the ghosting effect. But if I press Z and then go set this back to the off setting, which is 12 o'clock, now the images stay in view when I press the Z key. But if you go back and you grab like an image like this and you tile this one, you can go through, tile it vertically, tile it horizontally, then you get low res or high res, high fidelity sort of details there. So that would be a much easier way to kind of go through and do that stuff instead of doing it by hand. It really just comes down to the resolution that you want to project through. Sideshow, you're saying, is it possible to sculpt with Spotlight images on the screen? Yeah, so that's exactly what I'm doing. So I use Spotlight as my reference tool just because, especially during streams, I want to be able to show you guys just images of what I'm kind of working towards. And I tend to use Spotlight. I mean, if you don't have a secondary monitor, it's kind of a pain to get reference and bring it in. I don't like to use, personally, image plane is not something I like to have. I don't want to have an image in the whole background. I want to be able to just see gray shade and just see the model in 3 dimensions and just kind of look at it. So I like to just scatter the stuff around. And the benefit with Spotlight is if I press Shift Z, I can turn it off completely. So I can keep it on when I want it, keep it on when I don't. And if you want to sculpt while these images are on, what I'm doing is I'm loading a bunch of images, adding them to Spotlight. I'm arranging them the way that I want and putting them in the position I want. And if I go through and if I save this Spotlight in the exact position, like say I go in and I move this thing around, move this around. If I go texture, save Spotlight, I'll save this one as like Spotlight 2. So if I go load the original Spotlight, you'll see the positions are going to go back to where they were. So they stay like that. And basically, if you want to sculpt with it, you just need to turn the Spotlight wheel off. So Z turns the wheel off, Shift Z turns everything off. So I want to leave all this stuff on visibly. And that only works if you have that opacity right here. It can't be set to any of these settings. It's got to be up here at 12 o'clock. So you see that little orange hash line at the top, that needs to be vertical. So once that's there, you're good. And then you press Z to turn the wheel off. And now I can go in, and what will happen is if you don't change the configuration, the move brush works just fine. But if I go to, say, the standard brush or clay brush, you'll see clay buildup doesn't allow me to sculpt. And that's because it requires this Spotlight tool is looking for an image to be projected on the model. So if an image isn't over it, you're not getting anything. But if you go to the brush palette and you go to samples and you turn spotlight projection off. If you're not doing any spotlight projection with images, once that's off, now I can go and I can use all my sculpting brushes just fine. So this is the way that I work all the time. I'm using spotlight directly in Canvas, so I can turn this stuff on and off when I need it. And then sometimes I keep like pure ref over on the side screen if I need extra images, because if you clutter your canvas too much, you know, then it's kind of impossible to see. It's like the advertisements in Ready Player One. But anyways, so let's go back to this stuff. So we got the smoothed out little piece here, and what I kind of want to do is I want to get the scale reference right to Luigi's cart. So I might bring this up here for a second. Overlay just below the little gizmo there. So I want to get his chair. The chair to me will be a good reference point of like all the parts. So we'll call this the this will be the body. This will be wheel, front, arms, whatever these things are. This piece I don't need. I started like messing around with some of these like cop lights. I might just go in and do delete hidden, just keep one of those as a backup. And these techie wheels, probably not going to use those. So I actually want to go in, I want to make a nice seat. So let's duplicate this. Let's rename this seat. And I found that this particular workflow here is like, I just want to go through and just make a seat that just kind of has the right curvature and all that. So going in with like a move brush and trying to like start to like shape this stuff around, this would be something that I want to, in symmetry, I want to start like deforming this shape to become more like a seat, right? So in this case, it's kind of hard to do with the move brush. You could also go in, you could turn on gizmo. If you put this thing in the center of the object, so you alt click the unmasked mesh center, and you can click customize and go into deformer. So deformer won't work. Oh, I forgot I added subdivisions earlier to show you guys that stuff. So you have to turn symmetry off, put the gizmo. Gizmo doesn't have to be at the middle of the object, just can't have symmetry. And then click deformer, and then you get this deformer control. So you can go in and you can add some, you know, edges. So these little controllers here, add edge loops to the deformer. Control drag clears the selection. If you control drag over points, that basically selects everything besides the thing that you just dragged over. So if you hold Control Alt and drag, you get a selection of the whole piece. So I could go in and just Control Alt select here. I could start to like move this stuff up. And this is a really great way to work. I'll probably come back to this, but in my opinion, even this doesn't quite give me the speed and flexibility because I have to do selections and keep going back and forth. So one of the new additions that we made in one of the last versions of ZBrush was the Move Infinite brush. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this one. So if you go to the brush palette, you click Move, we have the Move Infinite Depth. So what that does is based on the camera angle, if I rotate to the side, hold Shift. Oh, sorry guys, you're throwing questions. Ibrahim, you're saying how do you know the 3D anime episodes are made so fast and so clean? Yeah, sorry, Ibrahim, you were saying earlier about image plane. Image plane you can absolutely do. Like I was saying, it's not really my preference. I like to have them here so I can turn them off. I don't like having images in the background, but you can do it. And I don't know what your comment is about the 3D anime episodes, how they're made so fast and clean. That might be in response to something else. Let me know what you mean by that if you're asking me. And the sculptor, you're saying, what about the points to the center? Oh, were you talking about the gizmo? Yeah, Takovach, Move Infinite's awesome. Yeah, so the points at the center, basically this is why, if I'm going to use this, this is why I'm rotating to the side, holding Shift, and I'm Control selecting. So I'm getting the whole line across the side. So I'm kind of looking at this as like a profiling tool. So instead of using Deformer to do this though, this is going to be the same concept, is rotating to the side view, holding Shift, and I'm not using perspective here. I'm going to stay in orthographic for a while. And then go to the brush, Move Infinite. And what this does is it's just a move brush, but it travels through the mesh along the camera path that you're looking at. So if I just go click and move, you see that that's going to move a whole line there. Now, this is a big reason why this is called infinite depth. It's not X, Y, or Z, but it's depth. So that means that it's the angle in which your camera depth is being viewed, or the model is being viewed by the camera depth. So from the orthographic side, I can go in with the big draw size, and I can start to like move this stuff around, and then I get a nice, cool adjustment there. However, if I were to go, say, to like a 3/4, and I say move, if I start moving, essentially that's moving everything through the mesh at this camera depth or this camera angle. And that's basically the difference. So if you're going to I'm going to use this tool to kind of just shape the seat here from the orthographic side. So I want to make sure I'm in that view. Or if I'm going to do like front adjustments, if I do it here, you'll see that that travels all the way through. All right, so I love this ability to do this, and it's a little bit more freeing than the Deformer tool. Deformer tool is awesome, and it helps for really slight adjustments when you don't have, and this is another thing too, is like, let's just say like I have curvature here. So if I go in and I mask this chunk off, and say we just use Gizmo, we move that, it's basically not, this whole top surface is no longer along the same depth track. So if I go here and I do move depth from this point, you'll see that it's going to have a hard time making that a clean straight line. So what I'm going to do here to make this a little bit easier is I'm going to just try and flatten out these lines. So I'm going to go in and do let's just do a clip curve. So I'm going to clip out all the curvature here, so we get a more straight sort of linear path, and then I'll just Dynamesh that thing, or let's just leave it as is. So Ibrahim, you're saying if I know how to make 3D anime episodes so fast. That's a really good question. I mean, this is mostly speculation. I know enough about the entertainment industries, and at least in terms of what kind of technical tools they're using. I mean, if you go back to even like South Park a long time ago, started using, they were doing 2D animations and graphics in like the traditional form, and then they eventually switched to, I believe, using like Maya and some other 3D tools to speed up their workflow. So they're actually getting three-dimensional objects that are rendered in 2D shaded sort of scenes, and that's not necessarily what they do for anime episodes. But the technical tools, I mean, there's I think Toon Boom is a really powerful tool that I know is used for storyboarding, animation, that kind of stuff, and it's essentially allowing you to create drawings and graphics and actually animate those in a really fast and efficient way. So it's really just technical improvements. But I couldn't say which programs outside of like Toon Boom and After Effects and other tools are used for sure. But they're doing less of the traditional drawing animation, depending on which shows you're talking about. Some shows, of course, still do it that way. But I don't know for sure. I mean, it's a really tough question, man. It's I wouldn't, if I had to say, it's definitely software that's helping them make it so quickly. Ian, you're saying, why is Inflate Balloon so finicky? Some parts disappear after you use it. Inflate Balloon, you're talking about going down here and doing this. This one is, yeah, I mean, each one is its own algorithm. I mean, depending on what you want to do, this one I find works better when you're doing a mask selection. And so if you do a mask selection here and you want to do like Inflate Balloon, you get, say, a different result than just straight Inflate. So you'll see straight Inflate, you kind of keep the plateau here, whereas Inflate Balloon, it kind of bulges out the shapes a lot more. So the whole point is that it's supposed to average out across those surfaces a lot better. But if you do a global Inflate Balloon, yeah, you might, and it really is going to depend on the model itself too. You want that model to be nice and clean. So like a low resolution Dynamesh is probably easier. Black Death, you're saying Inflate throws you off a lot. Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, the inflates are just different algorithms, so you're going to get different results between those two for sure. Same way that you're going to get different results from like Spherize or Gravity. I mean, they're both, just, you got to consider that they are different algorithms, and they're meant to be organically used, which is partially why we've developed so many different ways to do some of this like similar things, which is why I like to use, for example, Smooth All as opposed to Polish, right? I'm getting a better result. So yeah, just take care of like the source mesh that you're using too. Try to Dynamesh is a good one because you get more evenly averaged vertex points as opposed to something you hand modeled that might have vertex points unevenly distributed across that surface. But yeah. Ibrahim, you're saying that what's the hardest thing to do in ZBrush? I would probably say, well, it's getting a lot easier nowadays, but mech design for sure. Like hard surface, clean hard surfaces are still one of the more challenging things to do. But it depends on who you're talking to, because some people have mastered that trade or that skill, and they've got a workflow. You look at like some of our really good friends and ZBrush artists like Furio Tedeschi, or like, you know, you name it. Tony Leonard's one of the guys in this. It was just in the stream earlier. I don't know if he's still here, but Tony's got some really awesome hard surface workflows too. And you see these people like really mastering that skill level that it just takes time. I think that's why it's, you know, it's a little bit harder to do, because it's a skill. It's an understanding that you need to have for mechanical design and how to make things look like functionally accurate, and then making those surfaces clean. In my opinion, it's a lot easier to make it clean now than it's ever been with some of the tools and things that we're, you know, developing now, especially in ZBrush if you want to use like organic sort of shaping. Fabio, you're saying, is there a question you have on new brushes and alphas? How do you save them in ZBrush? You want to save new brushes and alphas? Okay, I'm going to go in here and just smooth this thing out. If you have any new brush that you have, all you need to do is you go to the brush palette here. You can click save. There's save and load. Now, you can save those to your own remote locations. If you go into Lightbox in the brushes palette here, you'll see that there's a bunch of brushes that are available to load. So these are actually located in, let's see, if you go, if I open up a new window here, you go into the root folder. So if you go to ZBrush 2020, go into ZBrushes, and here you'll see all these folders. So these folders here are the same folders you have here. So if I make my own folder, let's just say I go in here and I do new folder. Let's do Solomon. All right. And if I close Lightbox, go back to brush, you'll see now there's a folder called Solomon. So if I go in here and I just say, you know, I want to make my own custom brush. I'll just say I want to make, let's say this is my own custom clay buildup. I can go here, click Save As, go into that Pixologic root directory, go to 2020.1, go to Brushes, and I can go into that folder, and we'll call this Clay Buildup 1. I'll call this Clay Buildup Custom, and I can save that there. So now when I go to Lightbox and open up the brush palette, open up this folder, I have a brush here that if I double click, I can now load it. So you could do that in the same fashion with alphas. So alphas here in this palette, you can save them there, and then they'll always be here in Lightbox where you can double click, and that's going to load this thing. If I double click, that will, oh, it's not in Spotlight. I want to double click it and load this thing into the alpha palette here. So these aren't default alphas that are loaded into the palette that you see here. These ones are in that root directory that you can basically go in and save. So just like I showed you the root folder directory to the brushes, you'll see the same folder Z alphas up here. So you can put stuff in here as well. That'd be my best recommendation. Otherwise, if you save them alpha, you have the option to, well, you can only import export, but brushes, you can save these to like your own folder and then load those back in. But if you want to have it accessible in ZBrush, Lightbox directories are the best way to go. All right, so let me just load my Spotlight real quick. And let me know if that answered your question. Ibrahim, you're saying, how does ZBrush Guides Pablo make his brushes? A lot of his brushes are tweaking. I'm going to click reset all brushes here so I can bring this thing back. Yeah, Pablo's a really great ZBrush artist and educator, and he's, of course, yeah, he's giving you guys a lot of access. If you guys go to ZBrush Guides, you get access to a lot of his stuff. He is doing a lot of, like, going into the stroke palette, it's changing a lot of stroke settings. It's also going into things like brush modifiers. You have a lot of different brush modifier types. You have different surface types. And most importantly, in conjunction with a lot of these settings, elasticity, twisting, orientation. These are pretty much all the big changes that are being made to brushes exist in these menus. So curve options, depth options, sample options, things like this. These in conjunction with stroke palette changes. So if it's anything along a curve, sometimes that'll be a big effect. And most importantly, a lot of that stuff does depend on a good alpha as well. So an alpha might drive a brush. For example, the clay buildup brush, this one I love to use because it has a nice sort of like soft clay texture. All this is, if you turn, right now is a square alpha, that's basically giving you that sort of layer effect. If you were to go in and turn that off, you're getting basically just a brush with its default configurations, its default settings. So like going into the samples, for example, this option has buildup. So what buildup does is if I keep drawing my cursor and I keep going, it keeps growing and keeps growing, right? So it's going to continue to grow for good or for bad, right? So sometimes it gives you really bad surfaces. Not all brushes have that tool. So if you go to the clay brush, you click B, C, and you click just clay. This one, if you go to brush samples, you see buildup is off. So this one, when I start drawing, it looks the same, but as I keep going over the same surface, it doesn't have buildup. So things like this, these are the big effects or factors that he is changing to make those brushes for sure. And like I said, also custom alphas are a big part of it too. All right, so let me, I need to get some progress going in here because this chair is not looking too great. So I'm going to go in with like clip, brush. And let's just bring this guy up. I'm just using the clip brush to kind of go through and clip out some of the stuff. And let's move this forward a little bit. We'll clean up and tidy up a lot of this stuff soon enough. So I'm going to go Dynamesh just a little bit higher. And I'm going to turn on Gizmo. And I'm going to do a smooth all. All right, so I'll get like just a tidy little object for that chair. So most importantly, I'm just trying to figure out the scale factors here. So going back to that floor grid, I really need to, these arms to me aren't going to be able to give me enough of what I want. I want to get some of the factors here of the car. So let's go in and we're going to turn on this body. So this is going to be the bubble part of the car. So if I go here, like considering that this might be the space that he's going to sit in inside. So I want to get this. So just know that's the reference point that I'm kind of looking at down here is this part of the car. And I'll turn on transparency. And then let's just check these guys, turn those on. As of right now, all I'm trying to do is get proportions a little bit more accurate here to like a stylized scene. So these things might have to be a little bit bigger. I want the cart to be smaller too. So maybe like something like that. All right, so he's going to have to be, I'm probably going to have to pose a version of him that, oh, that's weird. The transparency is on. So I might have to get him posed so he's like sitting in the car to give myself something a little bit more in line with this. But now what I'm going to do is just with this thing here, I might go in and just modify this. So I'm using that move infinite. And to make this cleaner, I'm going to reduce that resolution. Keep this Dynamesh resolution super low. And that should help me. So if I have a big move stroke, I now should be able to start creating cleaner sort of curved surfaces here. And of course, I'll smooth this out if it's a little too stair-steppy. So I can go in here and do a smooth all. I'm just trying to get this thing to be a little bit taller. And maybe go on with clip curve to kind of flatten out that side there. Okay. And then let's smooth all one more time. Click accept. All right. Now, let's see. Before I get any further, I think what I'm really going to need here is I don't necessarily want to do the front plate of the car. That to me is like, I like the Bladerunner pieces. These pieces I think need to stay. But what I like about this setup here is kind of going back to the frame of what I want this to look like. I want to do swinging doors are going to open. I'm going to do some windows as well. There's a lot of space here, kind of going back to that concept piece of what I really like. Let's just load this thing up real quick. I like some of the techie stuff happening between here, so I want to get some of that in, and I also want to start some of these grooves and windows going. But before I do that, because it's still technically a Mario Kart, I want to have the wheels here. So let's go in and let's start getting these wheels in place. So these things are going to be pretty close in there. And I need to somehow reference the wheels with this piece. Now, those wheels, let me go back to load this spotlight here. These are kind of like the iconic default ones. Pre-drag, what's up, man? Sorry, guys. You guys have been chatting like crazy. What's the best way to connect a topology-ready human head to the body? Ooh, if you want to make glass, is there a way to render it transparent? The only way to render transparent in ZBrush is if you go to, so yeah, it's per subtool. So you select a subtool, you go to display properties, you can open up BPR settings. And if you turn on BPR, let's click yes, BPR transparency shadings, that makes this object transparent. So when I press BPR, it's going to go through and render. And oh, I do need to go into references, render properties. Transparency is on. Should be working. Let's try this one. There we go. So normally, yeah, so you turn this on and you'll get a transparent sort of setup. So these are like, it's a simple option. You just need to go into render properties, turn on render transparency. So that will actually allow you to do it. But in this case, like you're not going to have many other options for that. It would be a good, simple, quick preview to do in ZBrush for sure. Talk about, you were saying the best way to reconnect topology, a human head to a body. The best way to do that would be to, if you needed to do that, if you don't want to change that topology, is probably bridge like ZModeler topo that to something else. So like you'd basically need to go in, like say you have something like this. I would consider just retopo by hand. So you get like topo here that we like. Modify topo, delete hidden. Oh, I need to bake those layers. Yeah, okay, all right. Delete hidden. All right, so you get topo here. Let's say you wanted to like weld that to something else. Now, if you go into brush insert, so looking at this thing from the top, let's go brush insert, create insert mesh new. If we go to say let's do this. Let me just try and grab a simple sphere here. Make polymesh. Whoops. Make polymesh 3D. Now, it's been a while since I did this. Let's go to mask circle. So if you go in, let's say we draw a little section here, we press Control W, so we get a polygroup. Now, if we draw that head into that section, we Control drag. I forget. Or maybe, hold on, let me try this. I can't remember if this needs to be a hole. It's been such a long time since we made that feature. Say position this here, Control drag. Oh wait, I think that also needs to be a single poly group. What's up, bro? Who's making realism in Pixologic? What do you mean by realism, Ibrahim? let's see. If you were to take this thing, let's go say delete hidden. Let's just draw this head. There's one way we could do it is we can keep that topo. Let's go brush, curve. And there is a curve, let's see, curve bridge. So if I do stroke frame mesh. So you get two curves, we can click one. And basically what it's going to do is it's going to try to bridge those connections. In this case, it might not do it. Now, without going in, because this is going to take me too long to go through and set up, what I want to show you is Mesh Fusion. So the best thing I can show you right now, instead of fiddling with this for too long, is go to, let's see, docs.pixologic.com, and there should be a section in here called Mesh Fusion. Here you go. So this is what you want. I'll post this in the chat. Essentially what you could do is all you need to do is make a bridge connection between it. You could always ZRemesh the body and do things in different ways. This will be one way. Let me just throw this in the chat. This is for, I think, Takabachi, you were asking about this. And then also ZBrush Central. Let's see if this is still available. Mesh Fusion. Yeah, this is the one. So here, there's a way, turn the sound off, to take existing pre-topoed pieces and weld those pieces together. So Mesh Fusion is another way. I'll post this here in the chat as well. And if we don't have online documentation for that, that should be there available on ZBC as well. Here's a step-by-step process on ZBC. Nope, never mind. That one's too old. Yeah, so take a look at those links, Takabachi, and if you you can always email me if you have questions on that topic too. Okay, so then let's get back to this guy. So I want to get this wheel going. The wheel is going to be a pivotal part in the design for this thing. Since I'm trying to get to, I did a quick little test this morning, and I want to get to this, but then I want to take this a lot further. This is just like super bare bones basics. So then those wheels, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this body here. I'm going to restore configuration on this, and I'm going to click and just bring in a cylinder 3D. Fusion, Radit, you're saying it's fusion like a boolean. It's essentially just it's an automatic welding between two topological surfaces. So you take one surface where you have an open edge, one surface where you have an open edge, and it bridges that and does that automatic topo for you. So it keeps existing topology while being able to do essentially what it is like what Dynamesh does. Like when you Dynamesh, if you go to brush, insert mesh, and you say click and drag a model part on top of this, if you're in Dynamesh mode, basically it's just going to re-Dynamesh and weld it together. But if you're doing it with Mesh Fusion, it's keeping the top topology with those parts. So let's see, what do I got here? I want this to be, I'm going to rotate this 90 degrees. I'm going to transform, turn on symmetry. And this is one where I want to do with radial symmetry, actually. So I'm going to take this thing, take this wheel. Let's subdivide it a couple times to smooth it out. Delete lower. I'm going to go Dynamesh this object here. So turn the floor grid off. So now the going to transform, I'm doing this along the x-axis. So the x-axis being the red axis, going in with x, turning on radial, and I can increase that radial count. And now what I can do is I'm going to grab just H polish brush here, and I can start to say like smooth this out that corner. Hold shift to smooth that. Now the only thing this won't do is it's not going to work symmetrically. But what I'm doing is if you take a look at my floor grid, I got the symmetry axis in X. So if I just do a quick mirror and weld, I can easily solve this. Sorry, Pancake, you were asking about how does how does that affect topology? Does it ZRemesh areas where it's fused? Yeah, so if you go real quick back on this topic, if you go back to that video, let me pull this up again. This mesh fusion video. So you'll see what the video is basically demonstrating is you're drawing an insert brush that it has topology, and you're drawing it on the underlying surface. Now, once you assign the action, you control drag to remesh. What it does is it remeshes the gap between the object you're connecting it to and the object that you drew. So you see this topology didn't change, this topology didn't change. The only thing that changes or is added is this topological flow that's wrapped around it. So it's an automatic algorithm that does that. So that particular feature is the only way to keep existing topology from objects and then say weld, bridge those things together. Now, once you have them in place, you could always, like with ZRemesher, if you have something that like a polygroup of an object, say you just go grab like Julie here, and we go undo this, like ZRemesher, what it'll do is if I grab just this part and I go to ZRemesher and I just remesh it, it will remesh this piece, but then it's going to weld connect it to the piece that it's on. So if I just say keep, we'll say keep same size and then click ZRemesh, it's remeshing the visible part. So if I smooth around that, you'll see that all it did is essentially the same thing, is it just welded that together with a new edge. Yeah, so you're saying it's basically a ZRemesher on that polylib that connects the vertices. Exactly. That's all it is. So this new polygroup is what we just got from ZRemesher, which is essentially the same thing of what you get with Mesh Fusion. But the only problem is that ZRemesher needs those things to be pre-connected to make this process work. So you'd have to do the Mesh Fusion first, and then you could go retopologize, say, this part with same on and keep it welded or connected. But what happens is you start to run into like parts here where it just kind of breaks, or some things might be, you know, infused incorrectly. So this will come down to count as well. So if the count that you're telling it to do doesn't quite match existing parts, this needs a little bit of finessing. So Fusion, there's no option to turn it on. It's essentially just the action. If you follow those links, you'll be able to figure out more about how that system works. It's essentially the same process as an insert brush. So like click and drag a part and then control drag into remesh. So it's basically an underlying functionality built into ZBrush. Bajaran, you're saying I'm sometimes glad that 3D models can't feel pain. Yeah, you're right, because this is pure torture. I know, you're right. For sure. Okay, so going back here, we got the, so I'm just trying to get this wheel going. I got a little bit of detail. So I'm just kind of using H polish to go through and polish out a corner, and then I'm mirroring and welding to get that thing symmetrical. Now, once that's done, now I might take this, since those edges are a little bit more smooth, by plateauing this part, if I go smooth it, it'll kind of like soften up those edges and give you a nice little transition there, which is pretty great. And I'll keep accept. Now, if I wanted to, if you stretch this with scale, you see how it affects the overall. It's basically skewing the mesh by using scale to go wider, if I want that to be wider. But if you go into the gear, if you keep the gizmo, alt-click to put it at the center, go into extender here. Extender, I can actually do just a little bit of an extrude, just to widen that out without affecting these, and then go in and click accept. Now I'm going to control drag to re-Dynamesh. And the next thing I'm going to do is I want to go in and do the tire treads. The tire tread patterns to me are pretty iconic in that shape I want to keep. So I need to figure out a way to make this a little bit easier to do. So what I'm going to go in and do is, number one, I'm going to probably do this with a masking technique. So let's give this a solid poly group. I'm going to do, for masking, I need more active points, so I'm going to increase resolution up to about 400. I want to get at least up to 1,000,000 probably, just to make this good, clean mask. Yeah, so 900,000, we'll call that good. And I'll turn Gizmo on, go click Customize. I'm going to smooth all just a little bit more. All right, so that's that looks good. Let me make sure it's mirror and welded. Now what I want to do is I'm going to use, essentially use radial symmetry with a mask pen, where I can kind of go in and I can start sketching in those tire treads, those shapes like so. But what I want to do is figure out, because I kind of have a little bit of a repeating pattern here. You got this shape right here that's repeated all the way around. So then it's basically going to be a reduction in the radial symmetry. So it looks like there's too many points here. I want to leave enough space to draw this whole group. So I'm going to take this radial down to maybe 8. Let's go down to 6. Okay, let's find a medium. Let's go 7. I think that should be good. Now I want to make sure, okay, this left side here is going to be my positive side we're mirroring. Ibrahim, you're saying, when is Brendan Isaiah going to be live? I'm not sure. If you check the schedule, you can go to ZBrushLIVE.com. The schedule here, ZBrush Live, click schedule. I'm not familiar with that streamer, but if he is one of ours, it would be posted here. So you could check that just to be sure. So I'm holding control here and I'm using the mask pen. So I'm going to start going in and drawing these shapes. But first I've got these 3 sort of lines traveling through. So what I want to do here is I want to just, with symmetry on, no radial for a second, I'm going to just draw a little mask. Make sure I'm in orthographic view here. So while you're rotating, hold shift, get to that orthographic view. So this is going to be that center line. And then we've got 2 more on the sides. So I'm going to go in here and do a little bit of a space between it. I can match this up here. And we get the 3. And then you do have 1 extra little line here that I might go in and do as just a visual marker. Okay, so that's all we can do now for the symmetry. Now I'm going to hold, turn on radial, hold control, and I'm going to go to stroke, lazy mouse, and increase this lazy radius. So now I'll get a nice straighter line. And let's start by, let's just get one of these things done. So I want to do, starting from the middle, it's going, I'm going to do one side and mirror. So I'm going to sort of merge this thing down. And if I hold control and drag, with that lazy radius up, you'll see we get the little red tassel. But if you hold shift, you can actually lock to angles. So I can lock to 90 degrees. I can lock to 45, which I think I'm going to do. And essentially, it's not going to start drawing until I reach the lazy radius, the point that I want to. So again, holding control as I start to drag, before I actually get a stroke, this is really important, before anything starts to get applied, just go a little bit and then add shift. So you're holding control and then shift and lock to 45. Now I can go as far as I want. If I let go, that's going to go through and apply that stroke. Now, one thing that does happen with, I'm using a Wacom Cintiq, the brush system has tablet pressure differences between the brushes and the masking brushes. So with masking, if I hold control really lightly and then push really hard, I get pressure sensitivity. Now with masks, for something like this, I want it to be a solid mask. I don't want it to have any pressure sensitivity. I want it to be at 100. Easy way you can do this in ZBrush, you can go to your Wacom tablet and just change the pressure sensitivity settings, but that will affect your brushes, which may be something you don't want. So if you hold control and you go to brush, go into, let's see, what do I want? The tablet pressure. So if I let go of control, you'll see some of these brushes, like if I go to like clay buildup, that tablet pressure might be on. In this case, I want to turn on global settings for this. So if I turn on global settings, I'll get basically a stronger sort of brush effect. So I don't have to press so hard. So then going in, trying this again, let's hold control and shift. Then I'm just going to let go and I'll get that little effect. Now I'll tidy this up, but let's go in and do control. So this is doing a step. I mean, I actually also do contrast. I want to clip out those blacks, or don't want to clip out those blacks. And then let's go in here and hold control, shift. So the benefit here is that I'm able to go to a 45-degree angle. And I can hold control alt to sharpen. So then it's going down, up, and then going up here. All right, so this might also, I'm just going to make my draw size a little bit bigger. And I'm also going to hold control and set focal shift to 0. So now I should get a thick sort of draw stroke without any fall off from that brush too. So let's do it one more time. And I'm just going past the line there. Now I have lazy mouse down here. I can hold control and turn that off, and I can just kind of go in here and clean that thing up. Or even better, we can go in with a mask rectangle, just remove that. Doesn't have to be perfect in this case. Now, holding control, turning lazy mouse back on. I'm going to keep that draw size at 13. And go up and over. So that's down, up, and then it's going to shoot up here and do some other stuff. So we can actually leave lazy mouse on and just use the rectangle to kind of clip that out. Pancake, you're saying, or just switch to a mouse for that part. Yeah, that's true. I'm not going to argue with you on that. A lot of times I will switch back and forth between mouse and pen for some stuff. But, I mean, this is like, I don't know. I'm at my home setup. I don't have a lot of mouse space on my desk right now. So I am kind of in a pickle. Got to pick and choose the luxuries. It's a luxury. And then let's go back to, I'm going to turn lazy mouse off. So I'm using a custom UI, just FYI for all of you guys. I am... the lazy mouse settings that I turned on in the stroke palette. Oh, geez, that doesn't look too good. Let's go in and do the lazy mouse settings. I just put down here, so I have access to it in my custom UI. All right, come on, Saul. Let's speed this up. So we can go in here and just getting really nitpicky now. So I got 2 lines. This one's shooting up. Let's take care of the first one. So this one goes up, over. And let's turn lazy mouse off. This is one of those times where just radial symmetry is just so much fun. So my draw size was at 13. Let's hold control, go up here. Control and shift. I'm going to tell this thing to go up and over. So boom, 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 going here, which I assume this one is going to be the one that kind of goes a little bit over there. Yeah, lazy mouse is great with this. The lazy snapping is so great. It takes a little bit. I know a lot of times like holding shift and you get this long line. If you let go, the benefit is you can do really long strokes. So hold control, shift, you can go all the way across and boom, you can get that thing to go in large distances, which is really powerful. So let's see, I'm at, this one goes up here. Then this one's going to go down. Yeah, so actually let's do this. Control, shift, go 45. Let go of control and shift. That's one thing to remember too is don't let go of your cursor, let go of control and shift, and then it'll go through and apply. So then let's see, this is going here, it's going down. This one actually doesn't exist. So let's go in with control. Sorry, I'm just getting a little messed up here with this pattern. Now, this isn't going to make much of a difference. Like, it doesn't have to be too perfect. It's just, I want to keep it as close as I can to the spacing between this. And this one should just go straight up. Whoops. Turn lazy mouse back on. There we go. Now I'm going to turn it off to, I like to turn it off to just erase lines. To me, it's a lot quicker. Instead of changing the settings, I get it done faster this way. And then where these two meet, okay, that's where I think that's where these things are kind of starting to like taper off. Yeah, so this one, I'm just going to get rid of that. Get rid of this. Draw size at 13. Let's turn lazy mouse back on. That one's going to cross here, and then this one. It's going to cross there. Okay, now I'm going to go back with that lazy mouse real quick and just kind of do a little bit of like a little wheel fall off. All right, so that should be good. Now, what I started off with was, sorry guys, if you're throwing out questions, I'll be there in a second. I started off with just a solid polygroup. So what I'm doing here is I'm just drawing a mask. I'm going to press Control W now to give this a polygroup. Now, once I have that in there, I'm just going to take this, I'm going to do Modify Topo, and I'm going to do Mirror and Weld. So then I'm going to get that pattern shooting across much better. So I'll get this shape sort of like projecting all the way through, and now I got all this assigned. Now for me, you could just take this thing. Of course, you could take that group, select it with a mask, maybe Control click to soften that thing in. You can go to deformation and you could do inflate like -10, right? Or just take that inflate straight up and just bump it in there, right? And you can get a pretty good result. But in my opinion, the mask and the edge quality from that is not quite what I'm looking for here. You could also do an extraction and turn it into a boolean. But what's up, side effects? Solomon Blair is in the air. I'm in the air. I think a better approach here is to make use of one of my favorite tools, PanelLoops. So once you make this polygroup, what I'm going to do is go to Geo, Edge Loop. We're going to make use of PanelLoops. So I'm actually going to select this group, and I want to do an inner inset, in inner extrusion. So basically push this into the surface, but I want to control the edge quality and I want to be able to clean it up. So what you could do is if you go into PanelLoops, when you isolate out a section, if you just click PanelLoops, it's going to take that and it's going to do an extrusion based on the settings. And it also gives you a really nice little bevel. So if I undo it, I don't want this to be an outer extrusion. I want it to be inner. So I need to change some settings. I'm going to turn double side off and I'm going to turn inner on. So what double side does, when double is on, if you just click PanelLoops, you'll see what happens is it makes a new piece that is two sides is a complete closed shell, and it actually disconnects it from the source mesh, which we want this to be one piece. So double needs to be off, and we don't want it to, usually by default, it just shot outwards. If we tell it to be an inner, that means when I click PanelLoops now, it's going to go in here and it's going to push that into that surface. And the cool thing, what I like about this is it gives you the control for the bevel itself. So what I'll do is I want that bevel to just be a one clean extrusion. The way that it works is it adds extra topology or edge loops that allows this to be much cleaner than if I were to just inflate it and push it in. So this is where these number of loops are really powerful. So I'm going to leave this at, we can leave this at like go down to like 3 loops. And the amount of the extrusion depends on the thickness. So if I go up to set the thickness to maybe 2 or 0.2, 0.2 might be a little too strong. Let's go 0.04. Yep, that's getting pretty deep. However, the bevel profile is sort of fully encompassing the shape. So if you go down to the bottom, you click bevel profile. This is showing you what that that thing looks like. So if I go click on this, maybe you can take a look. So you see that bevel profile, the edge itself is following the curvature of this piece. So if I undo it, I'm going to click reset, which is going to delete all the points and flatten it out. Now when I click PanelLoops, you're just going to get a straight inner extrusion that goes right down. And again, the benefit is it's adding the number of edge loops it adds is correlating to this number. So you get 1, 2, 3 at the edge. Now it is also going to add a border around the source object and the new piece that you're making. So that's a complete edge loop, which is a really powerful tool as well to make use of. So what I did is I kind of just bumped that in. And the only thing that happens is when you do this sort of extrusion, you'll see that you get a little bit of waviness that happens with the surface. This depends on the level of polish. So if I undo that, let's set polish to say 50 and then panel loop it with those settings. And then boom, you get much cleaner lines and you get that stuff coming in really nice. All right, so increasing that polish, you can go higher if you want. The only thing to take note is what happens with the polish is when you go through, you'll see at harsh corners or at turns when you want sharper edges, the more polish you add, if I go max 100, it's going to round out those shapes more. That's what polish is doing. So if you don't mind the round sort of shapes, in that case it looks pretty good in my opinion. That looks great. We can control drag to clear, and now you get this really cool piece. Now the tire thing, like of course the CG edges, like are just too sharp for me. So I want to be able to like smooth it out. Right, and in my opinion, that I'm just gonna Dynamesh this thing. Let's go in here, Dynamesh, Control drag to remesh it. So I'm getting rid of those polygroups that I just had. Which what it's gonna allow me to do is, actually, you know what? Let's just take a look and see what it does with them. So turn on Gizmo, go in, let's do smooth all, and the smooth all has the little cone control, so I can go more smooth, just slight. That actually looks pretty good. Not too bad. And I can keep those nice clean topological edges, which is not so bad. All right, so if I ever needed to use those later, I could sort of like come back to those and make use of those if I wanted to. But I'll just say compare and contrast. One thing I do like about this when I Dynamesh it, if I undo, is if I Dynamesh this thing a lot higher now, go up to like 600 into like the millions, the more points I have when I smooth this thing out, it's going to have more vertex points in those edges. So that basically means that the smoothing will, it'll have less shrinkage and it will retain more of those sharper edges, essentially. So the more points I have when I do that smooth, going just a little bit more, to me this reads a little bit cleaner. And this is mostly a conceptual piece, so I'm not too worried about topology at this point, but I have polygroups. So I could go in and I could remesh at polygroup borders here, which is also one of the things I love about PanelLoops is that it gives me those extra polygroups that I can then go grab, say, these two groups here, press Control W. And if you were to go in, I'm just curious how this will... I also have an extra group of these yellow groups and the green ones. Let's Control W those. And then if I were to just take this thing and let's just do where the wheel's going to be, I think this will help with a ZRemesh. If I go in with the mask, perfect circle, let's draw a mask here along the orthographic side. Press Control W here. So I'm giving this a group too. Now, if you go in with ZRemesher, let's do keep groups. I think it's going to need a little bit higher resolution to get the shapes here. Let's maybe go 15. ZRemesh with keep groups, so let's see what happens. With these polygroups can help a lot as guides to define the edge loops for the remesh. If you don't have it and you just automatically run it, it's always trying to do that, but the groups option can help. Yeah, so Pancake, it looks like you mentioned that. Keep polygroups, you could ZRemesh keep groups with that. Exactly. You were 2 steps ahead of me. For the final topology, this is probably what I would do. This is, since I want to take this into, I want to do like a real-time sort of render, a real-time scene, I'm going to need to have clean topo. And you can use, in production, of course, you might need custom topology for a lot of things, especially characters. But if you're just doing a scene and you want to do it in real time, as long as that surface looks good, ZRemesher is amazing for that. And it's going to, most likely, maybe I won't be able to get it done here. I might need to increase the target count. We'll see how this comes out. But I bet that I'll be able to get, I'm very confident I'll be able to get a very good ZRemesh result just by playing around with the right settings to get this piece to work. And I'll be able to do that for any of the parts that I use this kind of technique for. You're saying, is the wheel too wide? Yeah, it could be. I think you're right, actually, just looking at it from the image here. I might just kind of scrunch it down and deal with the change. But that is a good observation. Ibrahim, you're saying you should do the whole process of the character. Yeah, I would love to. My plan is to, I don't know if you watched my previous series, but I just did a full stream on, let's go back to ZBrushLIVE real quick. My past streams here. Let's go back to ZBrushLIVE. I just did a 4-part series on making a Mandalorian helmet. So part 4, actually, I don't know why they haven't put it up yet, but it's done. All this stuff is on YouTube. So if you go to YouTube, you can just follow the links. These things. This is a complete process of actually building the helmet, and then I went through the process of how to set up for prints, setting up the keys, all of that. Unfortunately, with the pandemic and everything, I was printing everything at the office at the time, so I have had to stop that project for now. But this whole series, this is 4 streams. Each one's about 3 hours or so that goes through an entire project. So anyways, my point is, if anything, that I want to do that for all this stuff. So I want to take it to completion. So I'm going to do all this stuff with you guys here. So that overall, you'll see with that, keep groups at target of 15. I actually got really nice clean edge loops all the way around all these pieces, and that's looking super clean when I smooth that out. That to me is pretty awesome. This is like total nerd out. I don't have to do any kind of topology or whatever. I could just do it the way I want and make it organically, and I can go through and now I get some nice clean surfaces. So I would bet that if I maybe change that target a little bit, I might get a different result, maybe better, maybe worse. Maybe going lower might help, but I think with some of the curves here, I need more points. So that's solid, and let's just leave that thing as is in that low state. But one thing I'll do is, to Ibrahim's point, I will go in and maybe just kind of scrunch this together. And that's pretty good. All right, now let's see what I want to do. I want to take this a little bit further. Let's go standard brush. So I'm going to go standard brush with low intensity, and I'm just using Radial to kind of go in here and flatten or curve out the inside of this wheel. All right, now what I'll do is, what is adapt? So adaptive is essentially, if you hold control, actually this will tell you, which the description here is, it sets a higher priority to the target polygon count because of the density. So the adaptive density mode, when the mode is enabled, ZBrush or ZRemesher will adjust the topology calculations to give equal weight to your target polygon count value. So it's essentially what it's trying to do is, when adaptive is on, adaptive is like you have two systems. Your target, which is how many points do you want it to be. I wanted it, you'll see I set it to 15, but the target, it actually came out to about 22. So the difference, that extra 7,000 essentially, is the adaptive mode. What it's doing is it's evaluating all the curvature and all the surfaces, and when adaptive is on, what that means is you're giving it freedom to add more points where it needs to actually keep those shapes. So if you turn that off, you're going to get a way more accurate number, a result from the target that you set. But you always really want to have adaptive on. That's a big part of what makes ZRemesher do what it does. In some cases, in very specific cases, you may want that off, but that's essentially what it is. And you can always hold control over these buttons, and you'll get the documentation for a lot of these things. So yeah. So then going into, let's go subtool. I want to get the rim going, which I think this will be a fun process. We could probably get some array mesh in here. One of my other favorite tools. So I'm going to just work on one side. Let's get a cylinder. Now I'm going to do just a few ZRemesher or ZModeler things. So I'm going to delete some edges. Scale this baby up. And now this, you'll see like actually I don't think I need that view. I can go full screen. This is one of those nerd moments where I just love, this is why I use custom UI, because I really do love to be able to see no menus. I just want to see the buttons I need. The tray space that I lose, I like having a space, especially because I use Spotlight for reference, so it makes a big difference. But if I go in here, and so this wheel, is kind of like concaved, number one. So if I want to get that kind of shape going, first and foremost, I'm going to go to Edge, Insert, Multi-Edge. I like to do interactive resolution and interactive elevation. So when I click and drag up, it adds edges. Right and left, it does sort of inflation. So if I solo this out, you'll see that when you have a little a polarized cap, this edge is going to keep it. But here's a little trick. We can just go in. Let's grab, do Control-Shift, click, and grab over this. I'm going to turn double side on and hide that part. Now I can grow visibility for this part inverse. Let's turn Gizmo on. We'll just flatten this piece. Move that in. Now I'm going to do group by normals. So if you watch any of my streams, I do a lot of hotkeys, but polygroups, group by normals, essentially what it does is it looks at all the angle changes, anything that's similar, it's going to add its own polygroup to it. So it gives a polygroup with the borders, the faces here, and these faces, which is really nice because then I can go do geometry, crease polygroups. And when I smooth it out, I get a nice smooth piece. So this wheel here, let's go. I'm going to add a couple subdivisions, go to brush, standard. Give it a little bit more radial count here. So I'm just going to use the radial count to kind of smooth out the inner part here. The more points you add, the more radial points, the cleaner this line is going to be too, which I probably should have done at the beginning. And then now hold shift and kind of go over this surface here. Okay, that's much better. But I want it to go a little bit more up this surface right there. There we go. Now we can see that curve. Cool. All right, so I just wanted to sort of accentuate. Now let's take this thing, kind of move that in a little bit more. And first and foremost, I'm going to take this edge. I'm going to go to Brush, ZModeler. I'm going to do Bevel, not Bridge, Bevel, Edge Loop Complete. I'm going to round that out a lot. And let's turn up our dynamic subdivisions. There, so that's looking pretty sweet. Yeah, dynamic subdivisions pancake. I'm for sure. I use that a lot, especially, you know, if you want to stay in ZModeler, it's always better to keep it low until you have to. Because what I don't like is if you were to go in and add subdivisions, you can delete them. But what happens is if I divide, go back to 1 and delete higher, the mesh state will change. So it actually smooths out the mesh. So if I go back, let's do Shift S here. That's the original. And if I divide, go back to 1, delete higher, this will essentially round out a lot of those shapes because of that smooth subdivide modifier. So this always, in this case, it's not that much of a drastic change, but it's really important to just keep this dynamic subdivision running while I'm working, which is a traditional workflow, you know. That's old school modeling. In Maya, it was the 3 key. Carrington TV is hosting. Cool. What's up, Carrington? Pre-drag, you're saying your spidey sense is saying there's some live booleans coming. You know it, man. You better believe it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mirror this piece over. Let's do Control-Shift-W. Oh, what's going on there? Oh, it did work. All right, I need to undo this object here. I'm undoing the wheel before I added any subdivisions. Let's turn the floor grid off. Now, oh, actually, you know what? I did a big no-no. So I did the sculpting on this piece, and I didn't have symmetry on. And I have subdivisions, which is a huge pain in the butt. So let's go cancel. What I can do, though, is we can go to deformation, and we can do Smart Resym. So Smart Resym is really awesome feature that if you have subdivisions and you need to, if you're familiar with this technique and you need to mirror and weld part of the object over to the other, if you have subdivisions, the topology order is being stored, so you can't change that after post subdivision unless you use the Smart Resym tool. So it takes a little bit longer, but it'll help me keep this stuff going. Carrington TV, what is up? Vijaran, you're saying you didn't know back then about back face masking, so you work thicker. Don't deform the back of the cloth. Oh yeah, back face masking. That's I remember when I was just a little lad, just getting started in ZBrush, and that was like one of the first like preferences or things that I started changing in ZBrush. It was before I worked for Pixologic, and it's like I always remember that one more than most. Backface masking, turn double side on. Those are like things that I do every day. Another reason why I keep double side here on the bottom corner of my custom UI. Yeah, Pancake, this is an option. You can mirror and weld, project. Yeah, that's that would be what I would have to do. I'd had enough undo history where I could go back and just go back to before I subdivided, turn on symmetry, and do it again. But I guess it's a good chance to show it. So you'll see it can take time. It depends on the number of subdivisions too. So this smart resym is what will happen with this is there may be a loss of I guess projection between the two. So it ends up sort of like taking the details that you have here, smart resyming them over, but in some cases you might see a reduction in like Z depth for the sculpting strokes. I've seen that happen before. Not always. It really depends. It's an algorithm like anything else, so it reacts differently to different situations. But yeah, this is an oldie. Smart Resym has actually been in there for a little while. And in this case, though, like this is one of those times where I'd have to like pick and choose my battles. I'm like thinking it would have been easier for me to just go back in terms of time to just undo back to before and not wait for this thing to project. You never know how long it's going to take. Let me just check to make sure I got all the questions answered too. Zilpha, you were saying Manda was a great tutorial. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I really hope that will be useful and will stick around for a long time. It'll be on YouTube forever, so that's a good thing. Yeah, and Smart Resym is symmetrical too. So it's looking at world axis, not access, world axis space. So essentially, it will resym the good side of the x-axis. But oh boy, come on! I don't want to wait for this forever. But yeah, definitely symmetrical. Let me see if I can get it to wait. Or if I close it. I didn't save it. I turned off my undo history. Sinister Ghost, you're saying the things you guys do in ZBrush blows your mind. I hope that one day you can reach these levels. Oh man, well thank you so much. Honestly, you will get there, and the fact that you're saying that about my stuff is like, I feel like my stuff is awful compared to the stuff you guys see on top row. But I'm essentially just a builder at heart, you know. So I really I've been in ZBrush for a really long time, and time, I think, if you are just getting started, it is time. You know, time is the thing, and the fact that you're watching these streams, in my opinion, is probably the most beneficial thing that you could do. Not just because it's me or us, just watching a lot of other people work is one of the most efficient ways to really get a grasp for how to do stuff. You know, because you can learn it, you can watch a tutorial and watch a start to end process, and you sort of like store in your memory bank how one person did it, but you'll find that a lot of people do things in different ways. And so it's really, really important to have a sort of wide variety of approaches to tackle things. So the more you try this stuff out and experiment on your own, I feel like the better it's going to be. But thank you so much, and thanks for watching. So this process here, I'm just going to have to go in. I'm going to do another one. I didn't save it. But Smart Resym, if I was a patient man, which I am not today, I would have been fine. Probably would have taken another minute or so. I don't want to keep you guys waiting either. Okay, so I got one side here. Let's just redo this part. Now, if I was also smart, like I don't like interruptions, so I'm kind of silly. I should keep my restoration at 20 minutes. That way I have some. Your quick saves automatically are going to save every 20 minutes and by default every 20 minutes. And if you leave ZBrush sitting without touching it for a minute, it'll also save. And that puts it in your Lightbox directory inside a quick save. But I like to turn that off because I don't like to be interrupted. I just want to do it on my own. Normally when I'm left to my own devices, I'll save on my own every 20 minutes. But during streams, I forget. So let's go do a quick bevel. Boom. And let's do insert multi-edge with interactive on. Inflate that bad boy down. And oh, also 1 second here, because I'm stepped ahead. I don't want to take anything away from you guys in terms of what I'm doing here. I did add an extra step in here, so let's do delete that. Yeah, baby. Now we're talking. So let's just take this old setup, and I'll do this over. So this is where we are. This is where I was. Outside of, you guys all saw me ZRemesh it. This piece in my first test this morning, I didn't ZRemesh it, but I can go through and do it again. Okay, autosave. Take it easy. Thanks so much, Takavach. The compliments keep me going. I feel like this is a good time for the Bill Murray. Thank you so much. You guys are really too kind. So I got this piece and I mirror and welded it over. Now the oh crap, let's load this. Man, I'm sorry, I'm getting all jumbled up. Okay. The wheel has some extra details, and these are what I would consider an array. So they're actually duplicate parts moving in rotation and evenly spaced. So you got two sort of vertical lines, or I guess 45-degree little circles, and then little bent pieces. This stuff I love to do so much, so I'm so happy to show you guys this. Hopefully you don't hate me if you've watched me do stuff like this before. So first I want to get the 45-degree parts. So in my subtool tree, I'm going to go into insert. I'm going to drop in a cylinder. And one of the reasons why the cylinder here, you see you get a little curved shape. It's a long sort of pill-like shape, but it has flat edges. So a cylinder, you have those flat edges and you have the curved edges, but the curved sort of circle, excuse me, but we don't have the thickness. So cool thing that we can do here is let's go scale this baby down. Okay, hold on. I think I set my settings to the reverse. It's now auto-saving every 30 seconds. Let's go max duration in minutes. Let's go 30 and 30. All right. It's like I'm getting heckled by my own preferences. All right, so I got this piece here, and I'm just bringing this out. Now, what we could do is, to get that long shape of the cylinder, we can take one of the coolest deformers, the extender, which you can just then take this. If you grab the toggle vertically and just take it up, does a nice little extrusion. And one of the benefits you get is you'll see this is tapered, so you get a little curve, and it tapers down. If I grab, you'll see, if I zoom up here, you can see orange toggles do the extrusion in whatever direction you want. So you could take a cylinder, essentially, and turn it into a rounded out sort of cube-like shape. But in this case, if I just do one extrusion at the bottoms, you'll see you get a little gray cone. This one is your size. So this one, if I take this down, I can actually taper it and give it that little bit of fall off, which is so awesome. And that looks pretty good. If I wanted it to be any longer, I think that's fine for me. Let's just maybe scale this thing up just a bit. And we could go, so you get one step if you go click accept now. If we were to go back here and do extender again, eventually you'll see, like, if I pull it all the way out, there is a maximum amount that it can't go. So if I keep dragging, it basically stops. So you can do it in stages. So if I wanted to make it just a little bit longer, I could go do a second extender like I'm doing here and go kind of pull this out and then take this one and just kind of taper that like so. And now I get a nice clean long piece. All right, so then let's go here. Let's click accept. And then I'm going to do uncrease everything. So these are hotkeys I use, but essentially we're just doing, let's go back. Uncrease all to get rid of creases. I'm doing Control W, which assigns a polygroup to everything. And then I'm doing group by normals to grab polygroups, and then crease, polygroups, and these are all hotkeys that I get. So now when I smooth it out, I get a nice piece. And then I'm just going to modify this so I can do edits to it. Let's do delete edge loops. Let me clear these guys out. And then last but not least, I'm going to go in with the clip curve. And I'm just going to flatten out these faces so I get a nice flat piece. All right, now when I smooth it out, that looks good. So then to do this array setup, we're going to definitely do a boolean. All right, so let's go in here, we'll set this baby, punch that through, and we'll go to subtool, and I'm going to set up a little tree. So at the top here, I've got my wheel. I'm going to just make that its own start group so nothing touches it. And then I've got the rims. Those are just below. This will be a start group, and everything below it now is going to be adds or subtracts. So with live boolean on, and I set this piece now to sub, that's now going to punch through. All right, so we got that thing going. Now the wheel, the shell inside is hollow. So what I'll go do with the wheel here is I'm going to select the wheel, go to insert. Let's bring in another cylinder real quick. And let's shrink that baby down. Maybe turn on transparency to kind of figure out the scale of that. Should be the same as the rim, and punch that through. And with this one, I'm going to do group by normals, increase polygroups, and set it to sub. And then with transparency off, now what you'll get is just one clean cut through the wheel. So go to dynamic. So this is changing the mesh. So this would be because in the last example I went through with you guys to ZRemesh. If you're going to make any changes to the model, I might save. It's probably a good thing I went back to this because I could ZRemesh this after I do this boolean to actually cut out the inside of the wheel. So I'll save that ZRemesh for the end. But now I get a nice clean cut there, and I can go turn on the rim, and now I should get all the way through. This thing should at least show me the inside of that wheel, so it should be a lot more accurate. But the thing is with this this part now, for me to go through and do these pieces, I'd have to duplicate it, and I'd have to go through and rotate and position this stuff, right? And that would take a while. So a little trick that you can do is you'll see if I move this up in space. This is something I like to make use of all the time as I'm sitting in the world center space. So I have the world axis at my disposal. So if you were to go in, this is the manual process, but if I were to duplicate this part, so I'm making a copy of it. If I were to alt-click to send the gizmo to world center, now the piece is up here, but the gizmo is at the world center, which means I can now rotate along a path. So if I rotate while holding shift, I can go to, looks like it's maybe 90 degrees, and I can set that to subtract, and now I get that piece. And if I duplicate again while holding shift, I get 90, and I could go through and do it this way. Now this is fun, but if I my opinion, one of the better ways to do this is do this automatically on the fly, which will also allow me to make changes to the original mesh. So this technique, I'm going to go alt click to send the gizmo to the center of the object, and I'm going to click once to send it to the world center on the home axis. Now I'm going to bring this thing out so we can see it. And we can keep that thing jammed into the surface there for now. And what I'm going to do is turn on array mesh settings. So turn on array mesh, which is going to allow me to make instancing of this piece. And I want to be able to rotate it along this axis as well. So I don't want the object to, the position or size to change. So I'm going to do lock position and lock size. And we have 4 parts. So I'm going to repeat this 4 times. So as of right now, the repeats are all sitting in the same position. So this is like, similar to like particle instancing. We're just instancing one piece of geometry to make replicas or copies of it and do stuff to it. So we got 4 repeats sitting on top of each other. Now the axis I'm sitting along is X. So I want to rotate in X, basically 360 degrees around this wheel. So if you go down to the bottom, you have a rotate tool, or a rotate transformation. So you click this. Now we're going to go to that axis, click once, and let's do 360. And that's now going to rotate. The first piece stays the same, but it takes all the other ones and it rotates them in 360 degrees. So what that means is now, if I turn solo off, these are all sitting at the world center. If you just turn gizmo on and you just move those pieces from the center, you're now getting those to go into the right position. And now if I turn solo off, or turn polyframe off, you'll see that we get those in their array states. All right, so this is a really cool and very powerful feature, because what I love about this is, number one, I can now go to the, if you go to array mesh here, just take a look. This is a previewable state. So if I turn it on or off, these pieces, take note that the active points count is accounting only for, when you turn polyframe on, it shows only one object, which is 84 points. So it's instancing these pieces. It hasn't actually generated them yet. So while it's in this instance mode, for example, if I were to go in here, let's just say I do insert single edge loop, and I add a couple edges around here, and I do say extrude poly loop, and I go say make a extrusion change to this piece. Now that's going to assign to all these parts. So if I now go in here and let's turn solo off, kind of punch this thing through, I can now do extra little details and see it happen with the instances on the fly. So the first way I showed you, if I were to duplicate, go move, and have 4 parts, if I wanted to make changes to it, I got to go back, delete those duplicates, edit the original, and then duplicate again and move. So array mesh is really, really, really powerful to just modify this stuff. Let me just quickly take a look at the chat here. You guys are saying sending the gizmo to world center using alt click is something I didn't actually. Oh, sweet, nice, throwing out tips today. I love it. Your pancake, you're saying, could you just mirror and weld on the z-axis and y-axis? Yeah, you could also do that. But hopefully this presents why I'm showing you this instead of doing the mirroring and welding, because those are so many extra steps where I get it here, boom, on the fly. And the benefit here is I can take this original piece, and if I go into geometry, modify topo, mirror, and weld, I'm going to get the same setup here, and I can now go in and rotate all these parts and these instancing and do this stuff all on the fly with just one piece. And I can make changes to it. So this is where I find the huge benefits to this. So I got the mirror. I'll keep the mirror and weld working. So this technique is basically starting from the world center. You have to do it from the world center. If you don't, you might run into issues where rotating and adjusting is going to cause a problem. And if you guys do follow me on ZBC, let me just pull this up real fast. One of my projects, or like one of the things I've done in the past, this was a pretty fun experiment when we were coming out with the array mesh feature. Actually, we were in development for it. I wanted to go through and we were actually still in beta, so we were working on these features. I was able to build like a division watch. This technique is all using a lot of that, especially these parts here, doing like these cut lines, doing these cut lines that are duplicated, 1, 2, I think 3 times. There's a lot of duplicates of pieces, like even just all these little details here. This is all array mesh in radial form. So this particular process on my ZBrush Central page, just Solomon_Blair. I haven't it's been a while since I've posted from the old ZBC to the new, so I have to put my recent work up there. But I have a PDF tutorial basically doing this whole watch, how to do the watch, the handle links, and it's like 80% of this is so much array mesh. So I cover this pretty in-depthly in that series if you want to follow me there. And I will post that here in the chat. And it's just so much fun when you try it, and once you grasp the basic concepts that are kind of illustrated here, there's so much that can be done with that tool, just kind of getting these really techie kind of effects. And it's just ZModeler, making some simple parts in array mesh. It's super, super fun. So that's there for you guys. So anyway, so I got this thing sort of punched through. Now, one little trick, though, that I want to do is, you see that these are kind of like angled. Like right now I have them 90 degrees. Let's say I want to rotate the whole group. So if you just take the gizmo, right now the gizmo is oriented to the object. The rotation is happening with array mesh, which is using the world center to do the rotate for you, for the objects themselves. But if you alt-click to send gizmo to world center, if you just click the home icon, it sends all the objects there, which is not what we want. We want to alt-click, which pivots it there. Now I can go through and I can hold shift and rotate these 45 degrees, and I'll get those things to be in the right place. All right, so really, really fun stuff. Now, similar process that we can do for these little bent parts. If I go into, let's insert a new cylinder here. I'm going to rotate this one. Let's just bring this baby out. Rotate this 90 degrees here. I'm going to make this, actually no, I want this to be facing this way. So here you have that same pill shape going across, but it's sort of like bent in an arc fashion like this. So let's scale this thing down so we can get it roughly to the right size. And again, what I'll do is go back to extender, grab this horizontally, and just extrude. Now, if it's a little bit longer, the cool thing about anytime you're using deformers, the cool thing you could do is you have to apply them, so you can maybe go through and do these changes. But if you're not done editing them, if you just click W, again, it toggles back and forth between Gizmo and Deformer. So I could go back and scale this thing down, W again, and I could basically go through and readjust. Now I want this to be just a little bit longer. So you see I've maxed out my extender distance for extrusion. So if I go in, click accept, do this one more time, now I can go just a little bit longer. And that should be fine. Let's go back and click accept. Now, the next thing that we have here with this is it has a little bit of bend. So bending is another deformer action that we can do. So I'm going to go in, and to make this work, well, let's just take a look and see what happens. So if you turn on Gizmo, if you alt-click to make sure it's at the center of the object, this is really important for these deformers, this particular one. If you go now, click Bend Arc, what Bend Arc gives you is three, basically it draws a box around the object, and it's giving you 3 points to bend. So you can bend in the Y space axis, you can bend in the Z space axis, and you can bend in the X space axis, like so. So you can take this and flex it out to make, essentially, a ring. Right, you can do all kinds of stuff. So this is basically like axis dependent, right? And it depends on the gizmo itself. So if you take the gizmo and you put it at an angle and you go and you do bend arc, you see that the angle is now changed. So for stuff like this, I'm just using X, Y, and Z orientation. I want that gizmo. This is why I'm going to alt click to reset orientation always to make sure that it's at 90 degrees in each angle. But what you'll see here when I go to bend arc is if I want to give it that bend, the problem, it's working, but the problem is I don't have enough edges to make this work. So the bends work, you'll see if I go to this angle, we got a ton of edge loops here. If I bend this way, it works really nice. I get a nice clean surface because there's enough topology there to hold it. So what we're going to do is go back. I'm going to go to ZModeler. I'm going to delete these edge loops in the middle. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Edge, Insert, Multi-Edge. And for this one, I'm going to turn off the elevation. I've been using that to do the little dip surfaces. Set this back to specific. Now, with right now, it's just on interactive res. So if I just click and drag upwards, I'm going to get a bunch of evenly spaced edges. So the more edges I have, just go up. Maybe about, you don't need that many. Let's go about there. Oh, I don't want that middle edge loop. There we go. Now I'm going to do clear creases, group by normals, crease polygroups. Now I get a nice piece. And now if I take this and, let's just show this off a little bit more. So let's take this piece. We'll just leave it as is. We know that we have enough to do the bend. We'll send this to the home axis. Now I'm going to do the same thing. So I can actually go back to this setting here, this array mesh configuration that is on the object above, and I can go and I can click copy. Now I can alt click on this piece, turn on array mesh, and I can click paste, and I'll get the exact same settings. So I could save myself a little bit of time. Now if we go in with Gizmo, make sure we do lock position and size. So without lock position and size, you see what it does is it just moves the whole group together. So we need that on. Move that into position. Let's go ahead and set these guys to subtract. And let's push these through. And then while we're in this array mesh state, we can now go into bend arc. And I'm going to just go in and just start to bend. You'll see we get angles of degree. So let's go. Say that's like about good. And then I'll go in and click accept. Now we got that thing working. And then, sorry guys, if you have questions, I'll come to those just in a moment. Let me wrap this part up. So you'll see that it's got like the pill shape. It's kind of like rounded out inside. So it's basically kind of ballooned. And also, benefit about this too is like the angle in which this thing is sort of sitting. I can use the gizmo now to kind of like fix that angle. But what I want to do is I want to actually give the inside here, this bottom shape, to have that be a little bit more rounded. So here's another great thing about array mesh and the instancing here is if I want to go make some ZModeler changes. Let's go. I'm going to delete all these edge loops here. I don't need those. I'm going to go in here and maybe do a bevel edge loop to round out that shape. And I basically want this face to kind of balloon out a little bit more. So another trick with that insert multi-edge is insert multiple elevation. Let's go in and just click and drag to add some edges. Drag to the right to add elevation. So I could start to balloon out that little shape. And then all I want to do is kind of like, I want to plateau, I want to have just like a flat surface. So because you have that single edge that's holding it into place, let's do, let's try this. A little trick is I want to grab all these, basically this whole chunk of loops here, and I want to flatten them out or bring them out. So I'm going to grab the lasso selection tool. And if I control shift click on an edge between a loop, what that's going to do is allow me to go through and isolate out this loop. So I can basically click on these parts. I'm going to hide those, reverse that selection so we get this little chunk here. And then what I can do is do control shift X to grow out to about where that plateau was happening. It's about right here. And what I'm going to do is control A, bring everything back. And this is really important here. I want to use gizmo. If I inverse this, I want to use gizmo to flatten. And the orientation is perfectly oriented along this object because I never changed it. I always kept it attached to the model. So everything has been rotating with it. So if I just alt click now, it's going to bring, let's see, let me make sure that it's, oh, it looks like I got a little bit of selection here. 1 second. So this part needs to be off. So I need to get rid of that chunk. Then mask this off, inverse, alt click on unmask center. Now I'm getting this thing going up to the top. So basically if I just click and drag that Z scale, it's going to be scaling in the direction I want it to go. And then I can go in and basically just kind of like move this thing up just a little bit. And then let's clear it. So now you'll see that we do have like a little bit of difference between it. Like I could take that thing and just kind of like bring it back down. But we have like an issue where this edge is kind of dipping too much. So a little trick that I like to do for this stuff is if you go to the edge, slide edge loop option, you can take this thing, slide it up to this one, which will move it up to that edge's elevation, and then move the next one. And then this basically allows you to average out that edge. Right, so you're just sliding it up the chain here, and that helps a lot to kind of get things to level out. And now when I smooth it out, I get a nice cool little shape. And if it's still a little not quite like up to par there, let's just take this one, go back, take this one up, go back. That's helping a bit. One other thing that'll help is if I do group by normals. Group by normals looks like it's not quite getting this group on its own. So let's take this group, isolate it out. So I got this. Now if we go to deformation and you have polygroups at each major border, if we just polish by features, that's going to fix a lot of that surfacing sort of gap between it. So now if I go through and I crease those borders, I'll get a nice clean little pill shape. And then let's turn that off, and you'll see we got a nice little soft sort of bevel in there. All right, so that's done. Let me just check your questions real quick. Most recently, interactive elevation OFC. Yep. There was a part that needed it. Sorry, I'm just going up the list here, trying to get back to Sheldon. You were saying snake cactus. That feature is that brush was intended for Sculptris. I mean, it can be used for a lot of things, but if you take any model and you put it in Sculptris mode, so we go make poly mesh, we turn on Sculptris. Let's go Sculptris mode, brush, snake. Cactus. Only in Sculptris can you do this, but you can basically take a surface and you can free flow extrude out while in Sculptris mode. So you basically get a little textured brush that allows you to extrude out like so. So you could also call this the churro brush, or yeah, it does churros and cactuses. Cacti. I don't know what the plural for that is. All right, but that's what this is for. Vijaran, you're saying 8 holes. Aren't 8 holes kind of form a circle? I mean, yeah, you could say that. Cactusi. Cactusi. I like it. It will forever be known as cactusi. Yeah, side effects. I think you were just kind of commenting on interactive elevation, and looks like you were using it for another project. Raditsis, you're saying, how do you get more poly density in certain parts of my model during Dynamesh? So Dynamesh is a global change. So if you want a model, like if you want a particular part of the model to be more dense than the other, you can go, let's see, if you go into Dynamesh here, you don't have local density in that way, but you do have local density in other areas. So like if you do like ZRemesher, for example, if I turn on the use polypaint, if I go in and say do polypaint, let's do color, fill object, turn on polypaint, the color density is at 2. So it makes this part red. If I mask this part, let's do density at say max 4. And let's do color, fill object. So you're just, when you change that color density, it gives you a different color. You paint that on the model. And if I ZRemesh this, what it's going to do is any areas that have the more density, you see you get more edges. Here you get less. So if I go back and I set this density down to like really low, let's do this part and do color, fill object. Oops. Color, fill object. So we get 3 layers of density. We ZRemesh this. This one, you're going to see you get basically just different levels of density. So that's the really one of the only ways to do remeshing locally. Otherwise, you could, technically speaking, like this is where Sculptris kind of steps in. So Dynamesh is just global. You won't be able to, you see if you try to Dynamesh a masked off area, it tells you that there is a mask assigned, so you have to clear it and then Dynamesh it. So it won't let you do any local masking through this, or local remeshing through masking. But Sculptris, however, what this does is if you go into Tessimate here, let's just Tessimate at level of 1. The bigger your draw stroke, if I go in with a smooth brush and hold shift, the larger those polygons are. But if I go super small and I basically draw a brush stroke in that area, a good way to show it off is like, let's do clay buildup brush. So big clay buildup brush, if I sculpt on that surface, you see we get pretty big triangles. So you get like the brush textures, not that high resolution, right? But if you were to go in and change your draw size and make it smaller, and I start sculpting here, you see you got a lot more of that brush stroke, and even smaller, I'm getting even more brush stroke. So Sculptris essentially is allowing you to change resolution by draw size. So smaller draw strokes, better the brush detail is going to be. Bigger draw strokes, less vertex points means less details. So that would be probably your best bet. If that's what you're looking to do to get local increases of resolution on the surface, Sculptris Pro is where you want to be using more often. Otherwise, Dynamesh, you're only going to get one solid layer. So hopefully that helps with that part. Pancake, you're saying you could hide before Dynameshing. Yeah, there's no way. If you try and Dynamesh something, like say you have a mesh hidden, and you go in, like say this thing is, it's Dynamesh, let's re-Dynamesh it. If you select an area and you try and re-Dynamesh, you'll see it's basically seeing it as, it says mesh must be fully visible in order to re-Dynamesh. So it needs to see all parts. The only way that you could do it is if you were to take this thing and do subtool, split hidden, break it off as its own piece. This is, of course, going to close it off. Dynamesh will seal it up. And then this piece, if you want to increase resolution, re-Dynamesh, you can make that one higher, but there's going to be a gap between them. So I assume in your case, you probably don't have the ability or you don't want to separate those surfaces. So again, Sculptris Pro is your better approach in that case. Vijaran, you're saying oh yeah, Sheldon, looks like, yeah. So it looks like you got it. You were talking about the cactus press, right? And Vijaran, you're saying because the bend holes are now centered in the middle instead of the top of the straight holes, at least it looks like this in the reference. You could hide. Yeah, okay. So like you're saying this piece here. Yeah, so these are like a little bit more up, I think is what you're saying. Yeah, so definitely. Like, and this is where, again, like when you're working this stuff out, now that I'm kind of getting here, like I'm not married to this at all. I can kind of start playing around with this and keep readjusting. And if that bend, like if the bend was a problem, or if I have the angle wrong, I just go back, keep it in this array mesh setting, and I just undo, right? And I can keep sort of readjusting the position of this so it's a little bit more accurate. It's like sitting up here basically at the top. So yeah, this is another reason why array mesh is so powerful, because I can make these changes if something's wrong or if I didn't see it right. This is where I like to be able to work the way I like to be able to work, because sometimes I just didn't do it right the first time, you know. So then last thing we got is like a hole in the middle. So I did do the hole for the wheel. I might just duplicate this cylinder here and click and drag this down below. And let's take this piece, shrink that baby down, punch that through. That looks pretty good. And then last but not least, if you really want to get into it, there's like these little sort of like pieces to like pull the cap off, these little grooves. So then what we can do is, it looks like I'm going to take this cylinder, I'm going to make just a little bit smaller. There we go. And it looks like these parts here aren't quite pushed through. Let me just make sure that those are all the way through. Yeah, okay, that's good. And then let's mirror and weld those to the other side. Now, so just mirror and welded that same array here. And let's select this one, mirror and weld that one over here. That looks good. And that little groove part, last thing I'll do is I'm just going to drop in a polymesh star. Let's grab a polycube. Polycube I'll scale up. I'm going to take this thing and do no edge loops. And real quick, I'll turn off the wheel just so I can see. Looks like this piece is going, say it's going about through. We'll set that to subtract. Mirror and weld that over. But maybe there's like a little bit of taper, so we can grab those top edges, use the gizmo to kind of just go in here and, you know, just scale that up so I get a little bit of an angle here. And then I could even go in with gizmo. Maybe just pull this thing back. Or if we wanted to like have it sort of like at a lip like that. Now let's turn the wheel on and just see. Yeah, that looks pretty good. And then let's just go in and grab like these faces here. I don't know if I like the thickness for that. So I can change the stuff on the fly while viewing it. If you turn on polyframe, you can see it. Otherwise, it's kind of hard to tell what's what. All right, so this is a pretty simple little detail there. Actually, I don't know. I don't see it as much. I need to make that visible. Let's just keep that rotated. And like here, you'll see it's a hard line. If I wanted to have that curvature, oh, there's my autosave. If I do want it to have that curvature, Shaleem, thanks for checking it out, man. Cheers. Be safe. It's just one last little thing that we could do. Let's go copy this array mesh here. Go back to this part. Let's do send that to center. Array mesh on. Paste. Turn on lock position and size. Bring this thing up. Oh, whoops. Looks like I... There we go. All right, just getting that placed incorrectly. Okay, now what I want to do is, might just want to add a little extra bend to that, you know, which is where I could go in and do insert multiple edges. Just add a bunch of edges here. And then I have this piece where I can now go to bend arc. Oh yeah, so the bend arc, I don't want to have the mirrored symmetry yet. Let's turn that off. I'm actually just going to get rid of this piece. Now put that, so this is where the bend arc needs to be, the center of the object, and now I can go in and I can start to like flex this a little bit. So I can give that just a little bit of bend. Yeah, that looks much better. I like that a lot. And then click W again if I want to reposition. Then let's accept that little bend. And then last but not least, I'll do group by normals, crease polygroups. Now I get a nice piece, and then I can mirror and weld that piece over, and now we're good. So that long-winded, but I got all those little details done, and I got those little grooves completed. Now, for the rest of the wheel, what I need to do is I just want to generate the parts. So these are, I have two groups. So one boolean is going to be the tire stuff that we did, and as well as the subtraction with the cylinder to cut that out. The second boolean group is going to be the rim and all the details on it. So the two start groups, when I go in here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click make boolean mesh. So go down here to boolean. I'm going to click make boolean mesh, and when I make this, let's just, in this case, I'm using a lot of dynamic subdivisions for these parts. So I want to turn this option on, and I'm going to click this. It's going to go through and generate the final actual meshes. So if you don't know live booleans, most of you guys do, it's a previewable setup that we then have to go generate the final piece, which is going to give me two subtools. So if I go up now, you'll see we get a new tool. One's going to be the wheel. If you take a look, we get, you know, triangles at those borders where the booleans happen. But what I can do now is, if I wanted to go back and do that ZRemesh, right, I could then reassign my groups to these pieces, reassign these extra little green ones with the yellow. So if you guys don't know, this is like a really inner part of ZBrush, but little tip is I'm going to grab, if I click on yellow, it only grabs yellow. But if I want to grab the green and the yellow and see them together to assign a group to them, if I Control-Shift-Click on a vertex point where they both share the same vert, I get both groups when I select it. Now I press Control-W and I get that. So that's how I was able to grab these two groups here the same. And now I have a polygroup inside here as well, which basically means I'm going to get a pretty nice ZRemesh like you guys saw. But for now, I'll just leave this as is. And then let's go back to my my setup for the thing. Oh, okay, so this one, yeah, I did lose. I forgot I lost a lot of my work. So let's go. This is basically where we were. So we have this part. Now I'm going to go in. Let's just clone this baby off. And let's take front wheel arms, bring those into this new tool. That's 123. I think I can go till 3. Or go till 2. So let's insert the... So I'm inserting the wheel. I'm going to go select the rim. Insert that. Oh, nope, didn't do that right. There we go. Insert that rim. All right, so then now you'll see those are, the scene that I was working in there is way smaller than what I have here. So see how those are sitting pretty far down. So what I can do is select those subtools. I'll press W, Alt-click to send it to the center of the object. If you turn on Transpose All, if I Control-Shift-Click and drag over that, it's going to select both of those subtools and block everything else out. Now I can scale this up. And let's bring this, yeah, I want these to basically be kind of like going between a hybrid between the Bladerunner thing and this. I kind of want the wheel to sit inside of it. Yeah, so let's turn that back on, move this over. And then Control-Shift-Drag to clear the selection, and I'm going to turn Transpose All. If Transpose All is still on, if you use Gizmo, that's going to move all the parts in the scene, which I don't want to do. So I got to keep that off. So that looks like it's roughly in place. Now what I want to do is probably just like start lining up the rest of the subtools here. Like for sure, I want kind of taking a look at. Let's load this setup here real quick. I'll show you guys my kind of plan for this. Yeah, okay. So kind of look at this reference. I kind of want the wheel to sit inside of this hub, show a little bit of it maybe. And then the other wheels, because technically speaking, this thing flies. The Mario Kart cart doesn't. So it has to have wheels. But what I did notice is like the old school 80s ones are like, their idea of the future is like they can fly, but they also need wheels to drive in the road, which is kind of ridiculous. It's a little Back to the Future-y. But so they're going to kind of sit somewhere inside of this shape. Most likely then just be sort of like consumed with some extra sort of techie stuff. That way it could still be a Mario Kart car. Vicharn, you're saying you wish you wouldn't be too strict on details. Yeah, I totally feel you on that. I've been there. I'm there all the time. The details are sometimes hard to... It's hard to not become obsessive about it when you have full control, but getting so focused on details also slows you down immensely from actually getting stuff done, which is like pros and cons. Like you want to be quick to get the details in and do it right if you're referencing something, but then you also, got to be careful because sometimes you just want to get the project done and not be working on it for a whole year. Yeah, trust me, it's been like the story of my life. I think I'm getting better at it with age. I start to care. I realize that I want to get stuff done quicker, so I don't fuss about things as much as I used to. When I first started in 3D, it was a lot worse. That's for sure. So I'm going to go, I'm going to duplicate these wheels. Let's go wheels forever. Make these the back. To rim back. So I'm going to turn off the front wheels here. Now I'm going to turn on transpose all. Control-Shift-Click on these pieces real quick. And just move these to the back. Control-Shift-Drag. Now we'll turn those back on. All right, so that's looking better. And at least it's in the right place. And I'm going to mirror and weld this stuff too. All right, so let's go here. I'm going to just Control-Shift-Click the wheels and just kind of get these in place. So I know, let's do the cart wheels are basically a little bit wider in the back than the other front. Kind of want to keep that consistent for sure. So I want to just kind of position these a little bit wider. And let's clear that. And then these front wheels. Cool little trick that we can do now is if I do, I'm going to do new folder. We'll call this front wheels. This makes it a little bit easier to make quick group selections. Put the rims, we'll call this one back wheels. Whoops, actually, I need to make this a folder. It's a new folder, back wheels. Put those in there. Now what I could do is when they're in folders, I can go to the front wheel group and I can do transpose set, which is automatically going to position or basically set up the transpose to select these guys by themselves. So I can save myself a lot of time, essentially. I want to move this somewhere inside. Let's clear it. Now let's grab this piece here. I want this to be sort of encompassing that part. Turn on transparency here and let's kind of get this stuff into place. Make that a little bit thicker. All right. Now the car itself is probably going to have to go. I'm going to have to probably, actually let's take these guys, pull these in just a little bit more so they can sit inside of that front piece. And then wheels, let's transpose, set, and reposition that. Okay, so now for this front piece, I might just go in here and let's just grab get a cube going. I'm going to set this to subtract here. I want this to basically just go in and cut out a shell of this wheel well. Let's mirror that thing over. Maybe something like that. And let's mirror these front wheels too. All right, so still kind of working on the base. I got the seat. Oh, I don't have the seat in here anymore. Let's go back to my backup tool here. There we go. There's a chair that I sort of marked out. So let's go insert this guy into that scene. All right, so he's going to be sitting roughly about that scale. So I have a little bit of space to work with. A little bit bigger than this Mario Kart car, but not much. Now what I want to do is, let's just get another little, just quick boolean cut in here for the wheel well. Set that to subtract. All right, so now we got that piece working. All right, so then everything else, I think I might actually cut this off so we can focus next time on just doing the body. So I kind of got just like a simple setup here. For the next stream, I'm going to have to get serious and focus up on actually going into, so where I kind of left off from the previous one was we got this, let's turn everything on. Starting to get a little bit more into the grooves, right? I kind of got, I'll talk about this next stream, is actually cutting out the spaces. And what I want to do in the next stream is just focus on actually starting to get the techie panel. So getting these extra pieces, getting all the groove cuts, opening up the doors, hollowing out the inside of the shell, really getting this thing cleaned out so we actually have space to actually see the character in. So I think what I'll do is I'll leave that for next time. I'll have that ready to go so we can actually rush through that stuff and actually you can see it all happen in that next stream. So we'll get him also in the car and yeah, we'll be able to go through and really flesh out this whole scene. I got the gun completed. This thing will be nice to do for that final scene. So if any of you guys have questions, I want to keep it open to the floor. If anybody wants me to talk about something real quick before we call it, I'm perfectly happy to. Otherwise, I think I'm going to cut it off and we'll go through and wrap that thing up the next stream. Cool, Alex. Thanks, man. Yeah, and hopefully everybody's safe and well. Thank you all for tuning in. Pre-drag, I appreciate all the conversation. You guys are the best. And definitely stay safe out there. Looks like you guys are all doing well. As long as we can keep working in ZBrush and stay busy, at least keeps us occupied, right? Yeah, thank you guys very much. I appreciate it. And I will see you all in 2 weeks. Actually, if there is a chance to stream sooner, I might try and stream next week if I can get the schedule in. So keep an eye out for the ZBrushLIVE schedule. Just go into that schedule here. If you guys want to keep tabs on this, we'll also be posting on YouTube. If you guys follow me here on my Instagram, you guys can always hit me up directly. I'd be happy to follow on my personal account. I'm there a lot. On my art account as well. And then also, of course, on my ZBC account, which is Solomon_Blair. So hit me up on Instagram, and I love to follow and chat. If you guys ever have questions or anything that you need, you can always contact me there. Okay, well, thank you all so much for tuning in, and I'll see you next stream. All right, everybody. Cheers.